Thank you. Please sit down. Right. Good afternoon once again to those who are returning, and welcome to today's full council meeting. Welcome in particular to members of the public joining us in the public gallery and those who are sat in the conference room behind or watching on YouTube. You are all very welcome. For those who are here with us in person, I just want to draw your attention to the evacuation procedures should it be necessary. If any alarm goes off, please leave the chamber through your nearest exit and we congregate outside on College Green by the cathedral. Everyone hopefully is seated at least 1 metre apart. There are other COVID precautions in the background as well, and everyone is reminded you are advised to keep a mask on, except if you're speaking or if you have a medical exemption. And when we break for an adjournment, please follow the instructions given and remember to remain socially distant and mindful of those around you. Agenda item 2 is apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor O'Rourke. Do we have any other apologies to note? No? OK. Agenda item 3 then is declarations of interest. Can I ask please whether any councillors have any interest to declare relating to the matters on today's agenda? No. OK. Agenda item 4 then, minutes of previous meetings. We have 3 sets of minutes to approve. These have been republished today as a supplement on the modern.gov app and on the website to update the attendance information. OK, apologies. I've been told that the republished minutes may still contain an error in terms of the attendees at previous meetings. So we will defer that and we will come back and we'll get those right. And we will approve those at a future meeting. Sorry, Councillor Clark.
Lord Mayor, there's a lady in the audience in the public gallery. She's got a small child and I believe she's going to be speaking today. I think she may have a question or a statement. Is there any chance, because obviously she wants to get on with it if she can, because the child is going to be a bit grumpy if he or she is here for too long. Is there any way that we can find out who it is and move them up the agenda? Is that going to be possible? I'm sure it is. If we've got Democratic Services staff in the gallery, if we can try and sort that out, that would be helpful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, agenda item 5 is Lord Mayor's business, and you'll be pleased to hear I have none, so we can move straight on to agenda item 6, which is public forum. So we have 30 minutes available for public forum, which we will split between petitions, statements and questions. Details of all of the petition, statements and questions received have been published on the website. So I'll go through the list, first calling on those who have indicated that they plan to attend. If you're speaking to a statement, I'd ask you please to pay attention to the traffic lights. There are multicoloured lights on either end of the bench here. They're there to help you with timing. In order to get as many people through as we can, and we do have quite a few people wanting to speak today, we ask that you restrict your statement to 1 minute. So you'll get a green light when you start speaking. It will turn amber when you have, I think, 20 seconds to go. If it turns red, it means your minute is over, and we'd ask you politely to draw to a close so that we can get as many other people in as we can and everybody gets a chance to speak. All of the statements have been published. They've all been distributed to councillors in advance of today's meeting. So my advice to you will be to pull out the highlights that you really want people to focus on. You don't need to read the whole statement and try and rush to read the whole thing in 1 minute. So, starting with petitions, we received 2 public petitions for this meeting, which hopefully, yes, are being displayed on the screen. First of all, I will invite the petitioner from Adblock Bristol. Do we have someone here from Adblock Bristol? There we go. I'd invite you to speak to your petition, please, for 1 minute. Thank you.
Thanks. This petition, signed by 1,700 Bristol residents, calls for the removal of the 2 giant digital advertising screens which overlook the M32 and stand in Easton. You may well know these digital screens, but imagine living near them, with the light shining through your window, big brand ads blocking the view of any green space, and the ill effects of advertising adding to the pressure of living near the motorway. Evidence from personal testimonials collected from 100 Bristol residents clearly shows that these screens are negatively impacting the lives of people living near them, as well as causing a real danger to people driving past. Now, 1,700 residents have signed this petition to take them down. From this winter, the council has the chance to serve a discontinuance notice on these billboards, and Adblock Bristol has outlined the process for doing this in a briefing which has been sent to councillors and the mayor. We're asking the council to look at this petition and take positive action for the well-being and safety of the many Bristolians who are affected by these screens on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the second petition we have from Jackie Walkden on the Avon Pension Fund. Jackie, are you with us? Hi. Thank you very much. Jackie, you have 1 minute to address us on your petition.
As part of the events around the COP26 March, we, environmental organisations and union members, collected 700 plus signed postcards asking the Mayor to put pressure on Avon Pension Fund via Bristol's representative on the committee to divest its portfolio from fossil fuels. These signatures were easily obtained in a relatively short period of time. For example, we collected over 150 signatures last Saturday in 2 hours. Many people told us they had pensions in Avon or they worked in finance and they were fully behind us. Imagine how many we would have had if we were able to spend longer on the campaign. People are worried about climate change, and increasingly so. They've heard the weak message from COP26 and they want change. In particular, they don't want their pension contributions, which come also from public money, to fund a catastrophic climate change. We hope seeing these cards will help the Mayor hear their voices.
Thank you very much. So we'll move now to public statements. We've received 46 public statements for this meeting, of which 12 people have told us they intend to be here to speak. We will go through those, inviting each person to speak for 1 minute. We'll do as many as we can, but we do need to allow time for questions as well. So if we don't get to everybody, I can only apologise. We have limited time to do it. And the first statement we have is public statement number 2 on the list. Robert Clark on the Mayor referendum. Robert, are you with us? No, I don't see anyone indicate. Okay, in which case we'll move on to public statement number 3. Barry Cash on Bristol Energy. Barry, you have 1 minute, please.
Lord Mayor, I have a request for Bristol's councillors. It is reported that Bristol Energy lost £43.8 million of council taxpayers' money. A motion to appoint an investigator to find out how this happened was voted down in this chamber. There should be an investigation for 3 reasons. 1, to learn lessons to prevent future losses. 2, to check that no fraud or theft has taken place. And 3, because Bristol's electors cannot hold their elected representatives to account at the ballot box if they are not correctly informed what happened to their money. Therefore, I ask those councillors who voted against an inquiry to do 3 things. 1, hang their heads in shame. 2, resign their position as councillor immediately. And 3, leave the chamber. There are approximately 200,000 households in Bristol that pay council tax. 43.8 million represents £219 per household. Soon, many Bristolians will be having a very difficult Christmas. £219 would be a great help. They are entitled to know what happened to it. Thank you, my lord.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next public statement is public statement number 5, Josephine Robinson on the climate emergency. Josephine, you have 1 minute to speak to us, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I am proud of Bristol for showing climate action leadership by being the first city in Europe to declare a climate emergency in 2018. Will you lead the way once more and become the first European city to endorse the plant-based treaty? Plant-based solutions were missing from the COP26 agenda, just as they are from government policy. Yet cuts to methane emissions are our best hope of keeping 1.5 alive over the coming decades, because 1/3 of methane emissions come from animal agriculture. Bristol can lead here by example by promoting a shift towards plant-based diets. Endorsing the plant-based treaty will help pressure national governments to halt the expansion of deforestation attributed to animal agriculture, to incentivise a plant-based food system, to encourage public information campaigns about the benefits of plant-based foods, and to free up land to rewild and reforest the earth. I urge you all to eat plants, plant trees, and table a motion for Bristol to endorse the plant-based treaty. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. And we'll move to public statement number 27. Bob Nichols on M32 Digital Hoardings. Bob, are you with us? No, it appears not. So we'll move to public statement number 30. David Redgewell. David, I can see you're there. On transport services. Just bear with us, we'll get a microphone to you. There we go. So David, you have 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is a very difficult day, really, to really bring to your attention that we're about to cut 33 bus routes across the city region from the 30th of January. I know Mayor Rees knows this because we talked about it at WECA. But it's very, very concerning because it will mean routes like Radstock to Bristol will no longer exist through Brislington. There will be changes to the routes in the Gloucester Road area. There will be changes to the routes in the Ashton Gate area. There will be services discontinued between Bristol and Bath via Bitton, although there's some replacements where you change it. A place called Cherry Gardens with a bus stop and a shelter as a WECA interchange. So I'm really, really concerned, and I would urge Mayor Rees to work with Dan Norris and absolutely get the MPs in the city region to raise this with Baroness Vere and Grant Shapps before we end up with a really bad situation with bus services in the city region and people find it difficult to get to work, hospital jobs, employment. And that's from the 30th January, and Doug Clutterbuck's refigurated that to me last night, that without the money, he can't run the buses. That's the Managing Director of First Group PLC in Bristol. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We next have public statement number 31, Charlotte Gage. Charlotte, are you with us? Right, just get the microphone back up to you. There we go, thank you. And you have 1 minute to address us, please.
Thank you. So I'm supporting the call from Adblock Bristol to serve a discontinuance notice on the 2 digital billboard screens on the M32 motorway as a local resident and an activist. As a new driver, I find them very distracting, particularly at night and in the rain when they're blindingly bright and flashing through the windscreen, which is clearly a massive safety issue. As a mother, I walk past them regularly with my 2-year-old daughter, and I'm concerned about the advertising impact and the impact advertising has on my daughter, such as the depiction of unrealistic and standardised body images and ways to look, and the gender representation they show, the depiction of unrealistic aspirational lifestyles which we as a family can't afford, the normalisation of driving petrol cars, flying and the fossil fuel industry while we're in a climate and ecological emergency. The advertising of junk food and unhealthy products, which we know have a detrimental impact on children's health and well-being, and that Bristol City Council acknowledges in their new advertising and sponsorship policy. It adds to the industrialised and unwelcoming and uncared-for appearance of this part of the city, when in fact it's a thriving multicultural area. So we can choose to reclaim public spaces from corporate profit for our communities and children, and this is what I urge Bristol City Council to do. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to public statement number 33, Janet Grimes. Janet, there we go. Janet, you have 1 minute, please.
Thank you. I'm speaking about the divestment of Avon Pension Fund. Thousands of people came together on College Green on November the 6th for the COP26 rally, worried about all that needs to be done to address the climate crisis. But the agreements reached at COP26 in Glasgow were not as ambitious or as binding as we need, so we must do more locally. Let's insist that Avon Pension Fund divest from fossil fuels completely and immediately. A gradual withdrawal of funds from fossil fuels by 2050, as the fund managers plan, is not ambitious or binding enough to keep us safe. Avon Pension Fund is our collective endeavour to provide a comfortable retirement for people who work for us all. But if any investment in fossil fuels does the opposite of this and instead funds destruction, what future then? Please support this call for faster divestment. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We have only a couple of minutes left for statements, so I'm going to skip through the list to try and cover some topics that haven't yet been covered by other speakers. So, public statement number 40 is James Dury on governance of the council. And James, you have 1 minute, please.
Thank you. On behalf of Business West Chambers of Commerce, I wish to express significant concern and interest on this motion to trigger referendum on the elected mayoral model. The model chosen back in 2012 has enabled voters across the city to elect a leader of the city every 4 years. We saw the need in 2012 for change, and we continue to support this now and wish to see it strengthened. We've had strong partnerships with the City Council. Our long experience showed that the system of local government in 2012 was often short-term in outlook and delivery and was holding the city back. We believed then and now and continue to believe that stable leadership which brings the city together is essential. The 5 changes in leadership in the years leading up to the referendum made stability and consistency impossible for long-term thinking. Evidence in the leadership project delivered by the universities has showed the model delivers more visible leadership of the city. Direct election gives the individual substantial democratic legitimacy to lead. Successive mayors have been effective in developing a forward-looking vision for the city and 4-year terms of stable leadership. We believe these points are critical in this debate. We do recognise that there needs to be attention to do with the role of councillors in decision-making. We point to other models and we also recognise that the council is now part of the combined authority and we believe it needs strong leadership to enable it to operate. So we feel that a referendum will be a distraction and urge that the motion be rejected or certainly delayed until a proper debate and an independent review has taken place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, we are going to move on now to public questions. So apologies to others who are here for statements that I'm afraid there's more of you than we have time to cover, and I want to allow time for questions as well. So public question number 1 on the list is from Carolyn Rogers and Jill Tarleton, and I think it's Jill Tarleton who is here today to speak to it. So I'll ask each person to read out as briefly as you can your question to the Mayor. The Mayor will then give you a verbal response and you'll have the opportunity to ask a follow-up question if you would like to. So, Jill, if you can start with your question, please.
What are the provisions being made by Bristol City Council to protect and prevent flooding in the Cumberland Basin, the harbour reaching into all the various wharves, surrounding properties, businesses and green spaces, given that the frequency of storms and flooding due to climate change is increasing? Storm surges around the UK are projected to show the highest increase in size along the Bristol Channel and the Severn Estuary, and sea levels are set to rise by 20 to 30 centimetres by 2050 and by 30 to 40 centimetres by 2080, endangering homes, businesses, cultural centres and green spaces in our city. And Bristol is one of the most threatened by floods city in the UK.
Thank you. So something I obviously had a chance to look through the questions, I'll say repeatedly today, that are the threat of flooding in Bristol sits alongside a whole bunch of other threats we face as a city. 465,000 people today, 550,000 in the next 30 years, already have a housing crisis, over 15,000 on the waiting list, nearly 1,000 households in temporary accommodation, 1 in 4 children living in poverty. We have to meet that challenge in the face of a climate and ecological combined emergency. And that's not just in terms of how we meet that challenge, reducing the use of resources and minimising the carbon price the planet pays for us meeting that challenge, but it also means what mitigations we put in place. One of those mitigations has to be the flood defences for the city. So we have to build homes, but we have to do it with the mitigations being put in place. So our flood strategy was put in place, was approved by Cabinet in March this year. And through that strategy, we set out the plans for managing the risk of flooding from the River Avon in central Bristol over the next 100 years. And that obviously includes the harbour area. So the strategy that we have, the plans take account of climate change and are driven by the reality of climate change. And in that sense, we have made sure that the plans are adaptive to the changing circumstances around us. The strategy that is being developed right now is being developed into an outline business case, which is using our local levy funding from the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee. Housing delivery will support the plan in two key areas. First, the development and landscaping themselves. So the way we do that development will be delivered in a way that delivers the flood defences at the same time as those developments are brought through. And second, the Section 106 funding can also be used to support the funding along the future of floodplain. But I would add just a couple of other things as well. One is, when we're thinking about this, we also have to think about the contribution us meeting our population's needs makes to climate change. By building homes on brownfield sites in the middle of the city, we minimise future dependency on non-active travel means of getting around. So that has to be part of the mix. How do we take advantage of those brownfield sites while also putting the mitigations in place? And the last thing I'd say is, I shared with councillors earlier, this is about money. Brownfield sites are complex to bring through. Our flood defence is over £200 million. That was one of the points we were making at COP. How do we get cities to get access to the money they need to decarbonise and put the mitigations in place?
Thank you very much. Jill, did you want to ask a supplementary question? Sure. Any follow-up question to that? Or? No? Okay. Then we shall move on. Public question 2 and 3 are from Nigel Shipley on Bristol Citizens Assembly recommendations. Nigel, there's a lot of explanatory text in here. If you could just read the questions,
that's fine.
That would save us some time. Thank you.
Okay. Please can you give an update on developing an independent one-stop shop as recommended by the Citizens Assembly? And how can local environmental and community groups become involved in setting it up, running it, and helping to engage the public in using its advice to live more sustainably?
So Nigel, I'm taking from the question, you're yet to come across the Bristol Climate Hub? No? Okay. Well, now you know, because I've shared it with you. We launched this to coincide with the anniversary of the declaration of a climate emergency. I've got it on my phone here. If you've got your phone, it's worth looking up, Bristol Climate Hub. And what we've done through this is pull together case studies, inspiration, direction, advice on what individuals, companies and communities can do under their own power in the context we're in right now to support our efforts to be carbon neutral by 2030. So I'd advise going and have a look there. And in terms of engaging more broadly, you'd be absolutely free to contact Nicola Beach, our Cabinet Member for Climate Ecology, Waste and Energy, and ask about how you can get involved in some of that work. And I would also bring to your attention the Bristol Environment Board, the One City Environment, and the Bristol One City Plan. So many entry points for you to be able to get involved with through those routes.
Thank you. Would you like to ask any supplementary question to that one? Or if not, then you can move on to your second question.
Thank you for that answer. Please can you also give an update on developing training and upskilling for the workforce so that the green industry is prepared to carry out the improvements required to achieve a sustainable future?
Yeah, and this is a huge challenge for us. The challenge around workforce is one that stretches across the economic restructuring we have to go through to decarbonise our economic system, but it also stretches into challenges like adult social care, for example. Right? The changing demographic profile of the UK population is not leaving us with enough workers. And one of the points Nicola's made is, even if we had the money today, we wouldn't have enough workers with the correct skill balance to be able to meet our decarbonisation projects. With the combined authority, obviously we have a commitment on having a proper skills track. Working with our City of Bristol College as well, we've through the One City approach, we've been talking to them about how we have that skills pathway that mirrors the journey we're going to go on as we need to shift the skills base, for example, to retrofit in homes and air source heat pumps in homes. That has actually been a key part of our economic strategy as well that Craig Cheney led on with James Jury, who's no longer here, as we think about how we support a just transition so that those people who are most likely to fall on the wrong side of the economic restructuring we're going to go through to decarbonise are supported through that transition so they don't end up just losing their jobs and becoming very bitter about the efforts we're making on climate change. So lots of work in terms of bringing those partners together to try and predict where those future labour demands are going to be and making sure the skills are in place to meet those needs.
Thank you very much. Nigel, did you want to ask a supplementary question? No, thank you. That's great. So we'll move on then to public question number 4, Susan Hackett. Susan, there we are.
Good afternoon.
You could ask your question to the Mayor. Hi.
So yes, following on from concerns about flood risk, I just want to reiterate David King, who is the chairman of the Climate Advisory Group, who said that London, Hull and Bristol are the 3 national cities that are at the most serious risk of flooding. So recent reports indicate that the historic harbourside waterways are in a serious state of disrepair. Embankment walls are failing. Bristol City Council unveiled proposed plans for a major flood prevention strategy in the autumn of 2020. So my question is, what connection is there between the floating harbours condition, the advised £249 million flood defence strategy, and the Baltic Wharf, which is traditionally has been assessed as a greenfield site, and its development? Thank you.
Okay, I think we'd have a difference of definition there of Baltic Wharf. It's not a greenfield site, it's a brownfield. I'm not sure, I'm struggling a little bit to follow your question, although the component parts I can hear. I shared with councillors earlier on, the city is challenged. There's a lot of the physical infrastructure of Bristol has not been taken care of as well as it might have, and we are facing some challenges about where it is in its life cycle. Bridges are an example. We reduced the speed on the St. Philip's Causeway because of the works that are needed on that. So, and there are lots. We do have the added challenge as being a port city of having harbour walls that also need, and this is the case we've made to government, that need to be maintained. So all that's a standing challenge. I accept that, and it's one we wrestle with. On flood defence, I mean, flood defence is something we'd have to do even if we had harbour walls in good condition, because the harbour walls in and of themselves won't protect us from flooding unless we have good flood defence in place. But again, if I'm reading behind your question, we still need to meet our housing crisis, and what we need to any strategy we put out to do with climate ecology mitigations are not anti-development strategies. What they are strategies that demand we do development in the right way and the right sequence with the right mitigations in place. Because the alternative to building homes is not to build homes and to continue with not only the housing crisis, but the social, the emotional, relational crisis that exists in the lives of many thousands of Bristolians because they don't have affordable, warm, secure homes.
Thank you. Did you want to ask a supplementary question?
Please.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, my question to you would be that given that the Environmental Agency has assessed Baltic Wharf as being a level 3 flood risk, and let's face it, you can't get worse than a level 3, okay, there's an A and B, but is it really a sensible idea to be building luxury flats in an area that is at high risk of flooding? So are we prepared to answer the housing issue by building luxury flats? And let's face it as well, ordinary people cannot afford luxury flats. They can't even afford affordable, because affordable is not affordable. Social housing surely has to be built where it is appropriate. In the many sites that exist in Bristol, where actually there are no more businesses in the centre of town, and not on a level 3 flood risk plain.
So I think we need to, if we're going to have a discussion about some of these kind of challenging issues, we have to be accurate in the way we describe them. There's about 40% affordable on that site, but I will not disagree with you that I want them all to be luxury. I want affordable homes to be luxury homes, just like I want all homes to be luxurious homes for the people of Bristol. What it means is that any development around the centre of the city has to come in line with the delivery of high quality, world-class flood defences. But again, there is a question, and I don't think this conversation around housing, environment, ecology has to be adversarial. What we have is a complex world in which everything has a downside. And one of the questions that I have to press people on when they say do not build houses is, if not there, then where? The World Bank is setting out the World Bank...
Can you just let the Mayor speak, please?
This is my point. This is a complex world with some massive challenges, and shouting at each other does not lessen the complexity and urgency of the challenges we face as we all wrestle with very, very difficult situations. It doesn't help, and it doesn't teach the rest of the city how to have nuanced debate around these kind of issues. So I'd ask you to bear that in mind. If we don't, the World Bank has set out the challenge for urbanisation in the paper, Pancakes or Pyramids. If we do not build in brownfield sites in the middle of the city that were in active travel distance of main retail, employment, entertainment zones, then they'll go somewhere else. And if you don't build them, if you don't build in and up, and that's the unfortunate trade-off here, do you build out and sprawl, taking up more land space because you're not building that density in the middle of the city? That's the challenge that we have to take on. Now, I'm not telling you where you should stand on that, but I'm saying, there has to be an alternative. We can't just say no, no, no. We have to say what the solution is. But Tom, you wanted to say something as well? That's Lord Mayor, is that okay?
I think, the point I would just illustrate is that we've got over 16,000 people on the housing waiting list in this city, and we've got to move on from a debate where it's not there, not there, not there, and I just don't feel that's happening at the moment. We've got to build more, and we've got to build more affordable housing across the city.
Thank you very much. That, I'm afraid, is all the time we have available for public statements, questions, etc. today. Apologies to those who didn't get the time to ask your questions, but everybody who submitted a question will get a written response from the Mayor. We move on now to agenda item 7, which is petitions notified by councillors. We have 3 for this meeting. I remind councillors you have 1 minute each to speak to your petitions. Councillor Weston, yours is first. 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. Mine is regarding the opening up of the Station Road bus lane. At the moment, traffic coming from Cribbs Causeway is allowed to double back on itself. It goes down No Name Road and enters Henbury. There are 2 roads into Henbury. One is that route. The other one is via Henbury Ford. And it's a ford. We put a road through a river and it floods. What we have at the moment are plans to move the bus lane south, which will stop the cutback, pushing all the traffic through the ford. And the problem we have there is, when it floods, cars get stuck and the road closes. And then in order to get into Henbury, you have to come from Cribbs Causeway, down Camford Lane, through Seam Mills, back down Kings Weston Road, through Blaze, and into Henbury. You increase the journey time from 1 mile to 6.5. And I think it's ridiculous that we have a situation where a community is cut off because of that. So my petition is signed by 1,189 residents in the ward, and they're asking for that bus lane to be reviewed. Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. The second petition we have is from Councillor Pulteney. Councillor Pulteney, you have 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is a petition calling for Bristol City Council to save Kingsdown Sports Centre from its proposed closure. It has 671 signatures. Excuse me. I'd want to make Council aware that a second petition is also being collected, which has just over 1,300 signatures so far from the wider community. These signatures on this petition come directly from users of the sports centre itself, and they raise two key points which need to be made. Firstly, the petition shows that the sports centre is very well used by people from outside the ward. Staff from the BRI, St Michael's Hospital, as well as nearby schools and nurseries, are clearly using Kingsdown because it's close to where they work, as well as students and staff from North Bristol Post 16 Centre and the University of Bristol. Secondly, more worryingly, it seems that our systems do not capture equalities data from service users. There's an increasing weight of evidence that there's a much greater diversity amongst sports centre users than within the ward as a whole. We can't see how this has been captured by the process the Council has gone through. There are worries that Cabinet may have been relying on evidence from the Cotton Ward profile, which would have ignored a huge proportion of service users and rendered that diversity largely invisible.
Thank you. Can you wind up now, please?
Yes, last point very quickly is that basically there is a significant eccentricity in the way that we've captured data around this. It looks as though a couple going swimming in Hallfield Leisure Centre would count as 2 people. If they played badminton at Kingsdown, they would have counted as 1. So would a family of 4, and so would potentially a sports team. This is not the basis for a comparative decision making. The community hopes the Mayor will change his mind on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our final councillor petition today is from Councillor Gollop. Councillor Gollop, you have 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Following the installation of a zebra crossing on Cold Harbour Road, some 20 car parking spaces disappeared, reducing by some 60% the available spaces. What this has resulted in is people parking on the opposite side of the road, making it too narrow for buses and heavy goods vehicles to get through. That results in gridlock and road rage on a regular, probably daily basis. Residents are asking urgently for yellow lines to be put on one side of the road so that traffic can flow rather than blocking and polluting outside their houses on a daily basis. There are 63 signatures on this petition. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. Right, we move then to agenda item 8, which is the petition debate. This is a public petition which has reached the 3,500 signature threshold to qualify for a full council debate, and we have 20 minutes available in order to do that. The petition organiser, Rachel Groom, will be asked to speak to the petition for 5 minutes. We'll then proceed to councillor debate, and then I'll ask the Mayor or the relevant Cabinet member to sum up at the end of the debate. So, Rachel, there you are. Rachel, you have 5 minutes to speak to us about the petition. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Mayor, councillors, we're here to introduce a petition of almost 9,000 signatures to save an existing cinema at the back of St George's Hall on Church Road in Redfield. Over the last few months of campaigning, we have found that whenever you say the word cinema to people, they either think of an expensive multiplex or they get nostalgic for the good old days. While we're a little nostalgic, that is true. The stories of many a film and audience are embedded within the 100-year-old walls of the former Granada. But what we're proposing isn't tied to the past. We don't want to reopen an old, traditional cinema. We look to the future and propose a bold, new cinematic vision that generates measurable social impact for the community and City of Bristol, one that is economically viable and sustainable. Neighbourhood cinemas are on the rise all over the country. These new cinemas programme with and for their communities, bringing old and new audiences with them. We've attracted social impact funding, which will allow us to push accessibility boundaries further than most venues. It will allow us to test membership models and a pay-what-you-can entry policy to ensure no one is excluded from participating in culture based on their income. We put systems in place to include the unbanked and work with our board to diminish language and cultural barriers to ensure this is a place that everyone can afford, everyone can access, and everyone feels safe and welcome. The current design of the building also offers itself to live events, music, stand-up, spoken word, conferences, workshops, and food. Underneath the existing cinema, the event space, there is a large kitchen and dining area. We would support pop-up kitchens looking to take their next step towards a permanent kitchen, a rolling, ever-changing menu reflective of the area's food heritage. This is a real opportunity to create a community hub for East Bristol. Think of the meetings and conversations that could happen in the dining area before and after a film. This space has the potential, in the words of Watershed's Mark Cosgrove, to be a real cultural connector. The joy of food, film, music, stories, and conversation weave themselves through divisions of class, heritage, identity, sexuality, age, faith, and income. It's hard to imagine a better way to create understanding between communities than meeting to share food and stories, experiences, laughter, and conversations, all with a cup of tea. Despite the already dense population, there is nowhere like this yet in East Bristol. We have no cultural spaces to proactively share the experience of our varied lives and heritage. There are no places for people from different backgrounds to be regularly brought together, and I doubt anyone in this room believes we live in a society where division is decreasing. We should be trying everything to build bridges. Livable and environmentally resilient neighbourhoods call for 20-minute cities. That's walking distance of Lawrence Hill, Easton, Redfield, St George, Barton Hill and Troopers Hill, even if you're quick. Last week, the Community Right to Bid team agreed with us that the site should indeed be listed as an asset of community value, and we thank them for their work on that. This important status validates our next steps for meaningful community consultation. We're excited to work with the surrounding communities and find out what we can do with this once-in-a-location opportunity, making space in the organising teams for people who might normally back away or fear their voices would not be genuinely heard or valued. So when we say cinema, that's what we mean and more. Part of our ask from the petition was that councillors and the mayor supported the asset of community value application. The other part was that you facilitate discussion between the owners, developers, the community and ourselves to ensure that this space is not lost. We ask that this is meaningful, that agreements are binding, and that any consultations are not tick box exercises. Councillors, Mr. Mayor, we know that housing is important. We really do. But there are half a dozen genuinely derelict sites on Church Road, and there has been a lot of recent development in the immediate area. There is some housing on the site already, and our plan will add to that, whilst delivering a genuinely affordable model that is sustainable. The people who have lived there all their lives and the people who have recently moved in all need somewhere to go, especially when it rains. We have shared a draft of our plan with you all via Democratic Services. We have a balanced budget of running costs, a commitment to building a diverse representative board, huge local support, national and global attention, and crucially, social impact investors who have expressed an interest in buying the site or working with the owners to make this a reality. I'll give the final words to Ron Merchant, father of one of Bristol's famous sons and childhood visitor to the Granada Cinema, who posted this on social media this morning. A unity cinema must become a reality to save the soul of the community. Mr. Mayor, councillors, your support makes it much, much more likely to happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll now move to councillor debate, and I'll just remind all members that the time limit on these and all of the debates is 3 minutes for councillor speeches, please. I'll call Councillor Breckles to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Right, thank you, my Lord Mayor. I rise to support this petition, and I do have to declare an interest or two. As well as being one of the 9,000 signatories and a member of the 2,000-strong Save Redfield Cinema Facebook group, I'm a life member of the Cinema Theatre Association. And through that, I've hosted a virtual meeting for this group with an architectural consultant who has worked on plenty of successful neighbourhood and community cinemas around the country. Also in that meeting was the leading player in the Picture House Campbelltown in Scotland, a community cinema that was recently extended with a new entrance, cafe bar, modern second screen. So if any application comes to my DC for this site, I will of course declare an interest and recuse myself, but I'll be lobbying in the public gallery. Cinema going is changing. Instead of travelling to out-of-town multiplexes, there's a growing demand for activities including cinemas to be within a 15 to 20 minute walk or cycle ride from people's homes. Post-pandemic, that change is being accelerated. Successful community cinemas have popped up all around the UK with one or more cinema screens and a large cafe bar area that's open to the general public and not just cinema patrons. This site can do that and include some much needed housing as well. What we're trying to achieve really fits the bill, and social investors are lining up to fund this project. It will be a real goer, but we have to get behind it. Wetherspoons left a huge hole in Church Road when they closed the St George's Hall. However, we have a chance to build back better. This isn't just about preserving some cinema heritage, as has already been said. It's about doing something new and exciting with the space. The plans include a community kitchen, providing affordable food, possibly with pop-up food stalls. The inspiration for here is for the cinema at Catford Mews, which already has that kind of setup. As well as an accessible cinema that could be used for live events, the site would also, as I said before, provide some much needed housing on top of the main entrance on Church Road. Church Road, we need to remember, is the high street for Redfield, Whitehall, parts of Easton and a lot of St George. It's not uncommon for me to bump into constituents outside Aldi or Tesco. In fact, I bumped into one only last night. If this site is lost to a purely housing development, cluster flats are proposed, so that's basically a stack of houses in multiple occupation. That would be building back worse, not building back better. The area's main high street would lose 3 active frontages, and that could be a tipping point in the wrong direction for a high street that needs more, not less, activity. The former Liberal club opposite has been sold, presumably for housing. More housing is going on the site next to the Hindu temple that used to be some kind of sports facility, and yet more housing is planned for the empty site next to the Stillage pub. Bristol has lost too much of our cinema heritage already, and it would be criminal to let this survivor, which is in surprisingly good condition, go now, when we have a chance to reinvent it for the 21st century.
Councillor Beckles, can you wind up now, please?
I will do so as quick. I understand the sale has gone ahead despite a successful ACV registration. Marvin, you and your team need to talk to all parties involved to help make the plans of this campaign succeed. This is an opportunity to really achieve something positive, so let's not blow it. It's a citywide issue. In fact, I'd go so far to say we need a citywide policy on community and neighbourhood cinemas so they're enabled, supported and where necessary protected. Let's get the ball rolling by supporting the Save Redfield Cinema campaign and their aims. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now call Councillor Parsons to speak on behalf of the Green Group. Councillor Parsons, you have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Some of you may be familiar with the Cube Cinema, tucked into a corner of Kingsdown, behind the noise and bustle of Stokes Croft. For 10 years after I moved to Bristol, the Cube was my home, often when I had nowhere else to call home. I learned new skills and confidence. I made new friends from different backgrounds. I broadened my cultural horizons, and I built a community. It's left me with a lasting belief in the power of community cinema. What is a neighbourhood? Is it just a collection of buildings, of houses, or is it somewhere made by and for people? A place for people to eat, work, dance, sleep and dream together. Yes, we need housing, and this credible, innovative proposal will provide that. But we also need everything else that makes a community. We need arts and culture, places to dream. We need bread but roses too, as the song goes. Cinema allows us to dream. It's a window into someone else's world. Cinema teaches us empathy, connection, community. This is why a neighbourhood cinema would be an incredible asset for the people of East Bristol. Here in East Bristol, 1 in 10 people go to bed lonely. And in the heart of our major city, over half of locals are dissatisfied with their leisure facilities, and less than 30% participate in cultural activities at least once a month. Nearly a third of locals have English as an additional language, and one of the amazing things about film is that it's a universal language. A cinema would create opportunities for culture and connection. It would also be a hub for Church Road, lifting local trade, making space for young people, which is sorely lacking in our area of the city, providing jobs, rejuvenating the high street. Food is another great connector, and as we've heard, the kitchen could unleash local enterprise. A cinema would give people, as one trader said to me recently, a reason to get off the bus on Church Road. So I'm delighted to support this petition to create a neighbourhood cinema for East Bristol. Please join me in lending your support and to Fabian's call for a citywide policy on neighbourhood cinema. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I now call Councillor Eddy to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Lord Mayor, I have long believed that far too few of our finest 20th century buildings are properly recognised and treasured. This is certainly the case and true of pre-World War II architecture, including the distinguished Art Deco features of the former Redfield cinema, which this petition refers to. The national pub chain Wetherspoons, which owned St George's Hall for over 20 years until recently, has a policy of acquiring interesting buildings, and their attitude is to be applauded. I, for one, was distressed to hear the pub was to close this past autumn. But then again, Lord Mayor, I freely admit I bemoan the loss of any pub. The organisers of this petition are to be congratulated over achieving the numbers which signed their petition, asking the Council to award St George's Hall asset of community use status. The petition numbers clearly exceed our threshold to come here for debate, and to date, I am assured by planning that there is no planning application for a change of use of the former cinema received. However, I do understand that in the event of asset of community use being awarded, the community has 6 months to come up with their own plans and to bid for the property prior to any disposal. Since I understand Wetherspoons has already sold the building to a private developer, I suspect sadly that this option no longer arises until and unless it changes hands again. However, no doubt the administration will look at all these factors when they receive the petition.
Thank you. I now call Councillor Classic to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
So firstly, I'd like to congratulate the campaign for getting the cinema registered as a community asset and giving themselves the opportunity to prepare a bid to save the cinema. Local entertainment facilities are so important, especially as we come out of the pandemic, and bringing back the cinema to Redfield to the local community can become a really positive addition to the high street and support other local businesses in the area. The cinema could play a vital role in bringing the community together, something that has been so sorely lost in the pandemic. And as you say, plans to make the building more accessible and make sure that everyone in the community can enjoy what's on offer, while also providing jobs and opportunities for local people in the area. While there is a desperate need for housing in Bristol, I'm pleased to see the full proposals include some housing above the cinema that would suit local need. We also need to make sure we create full communities with entertainment and leisure facilities, forming an extremely important part of this aim. Having a cinema would allow people in Redfield to access entertainment locally rather than having to travel into the city centre, and could also become a draw for people to go to Redfield, increasing footfall in the area for other local businesses. Allowing the local community to have control over the cinema would allow it to operate for the needs of the community. It can be used to champion local voices and talent in an incredibly unique way. If the campaign group have the opportunity to carry out their plans, then not only will they have brought back to life a much-loved piece of history, but also created something that brings amazing experience into their community. I fully support them and I wish them every success with this project.
Thank you very much. That concludes the debate. So I ask Council to note the issues raised in the petition, together with the comments made by members during the debate, which will be passed to the Mayor and the relevant Cabinet member for consideration and for a response. That concludes that agenda item, and we move now to agenda item 9, the statutory review of gambling policy. And I'll call Councillor Bennett to move the report. Councillor Bennett, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I appreciate we have a long agenda ahead, and as sure as I am that we'd all like hearing the sound of my voice, I won't take the full 3 minutes. This statutory policy, which must be reviewed every 3 years and implemented in this instance by the 31st of January 2022. This review only proposes minor changes to the wording of the policy, which are as a result of updates to national statutory guidance. The updated policy ensures we are in line with guidance from the Gambling Commission. It's worth noting the responsibility of the licensing authority in respect of gambling activities is extremely limited and covers premises licences such as betting shops and casinos, gaming machines like those found in pubs and small lotteries. The regime is permissive, and so the Council cannot refuse applications unless there are good reasons to do so, which must be based on the gambling objectives. This updated policy follows statutory consultation and engagement with communities and equalities groups and organisations that help people experiencing gambling-related harm, including Gamble Aware. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I now call Councillor Francis to second the report.
Sorry. Okay. Whilst I recognise that the licensing process for gambling is actually a national strategy, there are a couple of things I'd like to just point out, which I hope that whilst, you know, when a proposal comes to licensing for gambling, we have to consider the law, and that is really important. However, I would just like to point out a couple of things. Public Health England, gambling-related harm review in the House of Lords in 2021, points out that the government, as part of the NHS long-term plan, has estimated that over 400,000 people in England are problem gamblers and 2 million people are at risk. In its summary, Public Health England estimated that the annual economic burden of harmful gambling is approximately £1.27 billion. It further estimated that 647.2 million of this total is a direct cost to government. This figure comprised 62.8 million in financial harm, 342.2 million in mental and physical health harm, and 79.5 million in employment and education harm, 162.5 million in criminal activity, and a further 647 million in excess cost. This is why you should always print things off, everybody. Just a warning, because my computer has decided to freeze. So basically, I can't read any further. So I just wanted to add that this is not a Bristol City Council issue because it's a national policy. So we have to take that on board. So this is not a criticism at all, but I think it's really important that we do consider the data around the impact of gambling. And God rest his soul, my father passed away a few years ago, and he was, when I was a child, where would I find him? In the local bookies. And it brings back those memories when I think of that. So I just wanted to say that. So thank you, and I support Councillor Bennett. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Francis, and well done for keeping going when the technology lets you down. Happens to us all. So we're moving straight to the vote on this item. So the recommendation is that full council adopt the draft statement of gambling policy for 2022. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? No. Then the statement is adopted, and that concludes agenda item 9. Item 10 is the corporate strategy. I'll ask Councillor Cheney to move the report. Councillor Cheney, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I am pleased to move this report on our corporate strategy 2022-2027. This strategy was created with the support of a cross-party group of councillors and is the council's top-level strategy document, setting out our overarching vision, values and priorities for the council over a 5-year term. It's the basis of how decisions about future business plans and the council's performance framework are made. As the council's broadest strategy, the document is high-level and some consultation feedback has focused on a desire to see more tangible, specific action planning. This happens across the council's wider policy and strategy framework and also within the annual business planning cycles. The draft corporate strategy refreshes the previous version, taking into consideration the 2021 local election and challenges following Brexit and COVID-19 as the council plans for recovery and renewal. It also considers our role in delivering the fundamental changes cities need to make to meet the climate and ecological emergencies. These complex challenges we face will only be solved through working collaboratively, and the responsibility is not the council's alone. Over the past 5 years, we have brought together a wide range of partners to work with a one-city approach, creating a shared vision and a plan of goals and actions for the city up to 2050. This corporate strategy is closely linked to that one-city plan, describing the council's priorities and contributions to the city's long-term aims. It is also mapped against the Sustainable Development Goals and is structured around 5 cross-cutting principles to influence how the council plans and operates. This approach makes the document something that partners can navigate and align themselves to, matching their own goals and priorities alongside ours for the benefit of all Bristolians. Our vision, values and behaviours are key to delivering these goals. And they are that we play a leading role in driving an inclusive, sustainable and healthy city of hope and aspiration, one where everyone can share in its success. We are committed to building a better Bristol that includes everyone in the city's success. And we are here to support the economic, social and environmental well-being of Bristol alongside many other local, regional and national organisations. Having a plan to do that alongside partners is the first step in this recovery. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now ask Mayor Rees to second the report. Mayor Rees, you have 3 minutes as well.
Thank you very much. And so really pleased to second this report and just picking up on a couple of things you shared there, Craig, how we begun to structure this corporate strategy around the One City plan. So it maximises the opportunity to align this with the work of the One City approach and our partners who have also begun to align with the One City approach as well. Really important that we talk about the principles within this as well, including us moving to be a development organisation, which means that we don't only exist as a collection of services bolted together, but we think about how we support partners and other organisations to get things done within the city. And I'm pleased to say that so many of our partners have been looking at our corporate strategy as they've gone through their own corporate review to look at how to make sure we're getting as much alignment across the key place-shaping organisations in the city as possible. And I think that fragmentation historically has been an issue. The more we can get that alignment, the more likely we'll be more than the sum of our parts for Bristol. So this really is a strategy about how we take advantage of the raw material that is Bristol, how we get the homes, the services, the resiliency we need for our communities over the next 5 years. Just a reminder what that raw material is. It is what we are. It's the challenges and the opportunities we face. 42 square miles, 460,000 people, growing to 550,000 people by 2050, 187 countries of origin, 91 languages, 92 maybe, 45 religions, over £15 billion economy, 2 world-class universities, aerospace, thriving cultural sector. But within that, 15,000 people on our housing waiting list. We have entrenched inequalities, a 16-year healthy year life expectancy, 16-year healthy life years expectancy difference, climate and ecological emergencies, 1 in 4 of our children in poverty. We hold this aspiration and these great things alongside these major challenges. Those challenges have been worsened by the reality of austerity, Brexit and COVID, which has hit the poorest, the most vulnerable first and hardest and left them least well placed to benefit from any economic recovery when it comes. So we have to be incredibly proactive. Layer on top of that the challenge of the economic restructuring we're going to go through that will again, by definition, leave the most vulnerable people at greatest risk of falling on the wrong side of that economic restructuring, again, further compounding those inequalities. So getting our act together as a city is absolutely essential. But those principles of being a development organisation, sustainable and inclusive, are absolutely critical. So again, this is about how we as a council work with the wider city to deliver homes, to give children the best possible start in life. For those of you that are familiar with Marmot, this is one of the key ways we tackle health inequalities. It goes back to 2010. We connect people to people, jobs and opportunity. Easy thing to say, but we know how essential that is to break down social isolation and economic inequalities. And to make sure that obviously we're decarbonising the city, our very systems that underpin life, but also building nature into our future, economic structure as well. And through this, the council will play a leading role, and that will be leading by doing, but leading by serving also. And I thank Tim and everyone in the team and Craig for the leadership on putting this together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So moving to the debate, I'll call Councillor Grant to speak, please, on behalf of the Green Group. Councillor Grant, you have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm pleased to speak about the corporate strategy, as I was one of the councillors on the cross-party committee, I think quite an effective committee, that's met this year on 5 occasions to discuss the form and content of the strategy as it evolved. Lots of hard work has been put in by officers to make this into a very detailed and very wide-ranging document that reflects both the public consultation that took place and the collaboration of the working group. A few things stand out from the process. First of all, the strategy reflects the difficult years the city has just been through with COVID and lockdowns, and how these experiences have brought new pressures and shaped the council's priorities. The strategy recognises the additional levels of need, past and present, but also puts emphasis on the needs that lie ahead. We need to ensure climate adaptation and resilience building. We need to ensure climate adaptation and resilience building in our transport and housing sectors. The strategy also stresses the urgency of reducing our carbon emissions at speed. This will require us to find considerable external finance, but beyond the £1 billion annual council budget. Given this strategy covers the next 5 years, securing this funding should be an absolutely top priority. The strategy's equalities and inclusion approach is strong. For example, the final version of the strategy reflects the social model of disability, and to this end has moved it out of the health section of the strategy. The Women's Commission provided useful inputs on gender equality. We were also very pleased to be able to make sure the Citizens' Assembly points were strongly reflected in the recommendations. That latter point is important because it turns out a very tiny proportion of the city's residents have an appetite for bedtime perusal of the corporate strategy drafts or detailed quizzing on top-level priorities for the coming 5 years. This is, however, not because of any flaw in the public consultation process, which seemed to me to be careful and thorough. All inputs from those who engaged with the process were aggregated and informed our scrutiny of the document. This is not to say the strategy doesn't have weaknesses. Although the climate crisis is mentioned, there could be more on our carbon-saving measures. There could also be more recognition of the funding crisis that we are facing and will be facing for the few years to come in both adult and child social care. As we know, and as Councillor Cheney just mentioned, the corporate strategy is the highest level document that guides the Council's plans and decisions, and is to that extent a vital one. It can sometimes be hard to grasp how a document so overarching can provide commitments and how we can ensure that we deliver its grand aspirations. The key metrics for measuring implementation are not included at this level, so the detail in the forthcoming annual business plan for 2022-3 will be very important from an accountability and evaluation point of view. And obviously no strategy setting means anything without our collective agreement, so let's make sure that we put it into practice.
Thank you very much. I now call Councillor Weston to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. 'Twas the night before council, when all through my house not a creature was stirring, except for I as I reread the corporate strategy from cover to cover. The documents were hung by the chimney with care, don't worry, I won't go on much longer, in hopes that enlightenment soon would be there. And I'll stop there because I've got another few verses, but I can see people are getting a bit bored of the poetry. More, fine. My children were nestled or asleep in their bed, as visions of diagrams danced in my head. Now I actually will stop there. thought we should. First of all, can I congratulate and thank the officers for the hard work they put in on the document. It's one of those rare ones where I think we were engaged early, and I think our concerns are listened to. You can see the track changes. I can see some of the concerns that I had. I'll put through it. I still have some concerns, it has to be said. I want to raise them now. One of my problems is the document itself, the way it is worded, is so wide that it seems to prioritise everything. And my fear is if you prioritise everything, you in effect prioritise nothing. And there's a particular concern when in the opening pages you're talking about the financial problems that we as a council are going to face. So I'm not quite sure what is the priority, because it seemingly is everything. I also have concern about some of the language used very much frames what happens in the city in very rose-tinted glasses. SEND, when it's talking about that, actually. I mean, we have some severe failures, but you wouldn't get that from the document itself. We also seem to be, in our delivery, bringing in policies and strategies which contravene elements of the strategy itself. You know, so just as an example on this one, the inclusion of the Portway in the Clean Air Zone, we talk about how we want to access people to get to jobs, but that actually will sever access to jobs between north and south of the city, access in Avonmouth and the other way. You know, if we talk about wanting to support the local economy, well, actually closing Park Street is certainly going to impact traders, and I would say the larger economy there. The consultation running on the A2 bus route and what happens at the Triangle, where we go from 4 lanes of traffic to 2, not actually for any more bus lanes, just for 2 lanes of traffic, doesn't seem to support sustainable transport. So I'm concerned that already we're bringing in a document which we're breaching, even though the language is so wide. And to parody the Christmas theme again, this document isn't just for Christmas. It's for the next 5 years. And yet I already think we're setting ourselves up for an element of failure. So on the document itself, I'm going to abstain today. There are many good bits in it, and there genuinely are. And I do actually like the end of it when we talk about it's data-driven and everything else. It's actually refreshing to see that in a document. I wish that was in more of them. But I think the document itself isn't there yet. It's very good bits, and we're not going to oppose it, but with its weaknesses, we find it hard to support it as well. So thank you very much, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I now call Councillor Hartley to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for that, Mark. I've got to follow that. I firstly like to echo the comments of fellow councillors around this chamber about the strategy. An updated corporate strategy was very much needed to reflect our changing times, from the recovery from COVID-19 to the climate and ecological emergency. I'm very proud to have worked on this as part of a cross-party working group. As we can see, when councillors come together, a strong consensus can be built into a strategic forward-looking document that will help improve the lives of all Bristolians, one to remember for the debate later on. The corporate strategy highlights many issues facing Bristolians, from deprivation to climate resilience to equality and inclusion. As an organisation, we should fully back the values within this strategy, especially around respect and collaboration, which, as members know, has at times been lacking within this chamber. One particular element of the strategy, HC4, speaking on community participation, is of particular importance. We as the Lib Dems feel that allowing more people to participate in their communities and the city community by building the power of individuals and enabling and encouraging civic, political and democratic participation is of the utmost importance. May I suggest to the administration that neighbourhood partnerships allowed people to have an active involvement and participation on the issues that matter within their communities, and that their return would greatly help the Council achieve the goals within the strategy. I would also like to thank officers for their wide-ranging and very effective public consultation, which I hope will be used as a model for future Council consultations. The Liberal Democrats are happy to back this vision for the city and look forward to working with councillors of other parties to deliver a better Bristol. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Cheney, as mover of the report, would you like to respond to the debate?
Only to say thank you to everyone for their comments and to thank all those who were involved in the cross-party working group to create the strategy in the first place.
Great, thank you very much. In which case, the recommendation is to approve the corporate strategy, as I think is shown on the screen. This is going to be an electronic vote. Please make sure you are sitting in the seat with your name on it, because that's where your vote will be recorded. And voting will be open for 15 seconds. Please vote now.
Two votes.
Okay, so we have 50 votes in favour, 10 abstentions and none against, and so the motion is carried. That concludes agenda item 10. Item 11 is the medium-term financial plan and capital strategy. And once again, Councillor Cheney, could you move the report, please?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Apologies, me again, everyone. The medium-term financial plan and capital strategy are integrated and key parts of the Council's policy and budget framework and financial planning process. They are rolling plans that set out the Council's strategic approach to the management of its finances and provides a framework within which the delivery of the Council's priorities can be progressed and sustainability achieved over the long term, medium term. It's my stomach, I think I'm hungry. The refresh of the MTFP covers the period 2022 to 2027 and considers the financial outlook for the Council over the next 5 years after considering changes in the national and local context which may impact on the Council, ongoing financial uncertainty associated to post-COVID-19 recovery, delays to local government funding reforms, savings measures agreed in the past year but not delivered, emerging demands, pressures, growth and opportunities. Based on known funding levels, the MTFP initially identified a 2022-23 funding gap in the General Fund of 41.2 million and the DSG of 35.8 million, both prior to the spending review in the autumn budget. Following our review of the outcome of the spending review and by updating the MTFP assumptions, we now estimate that the General Fund funding gap for 2022-23 will reduce to 23.1 million, a significant sum. This remains a huge challenge for the coming year and one in which Bristol is not alone. The local picture reflects the national one in terms of the challenges facing the public sector. Care provider services for adults and children, mental health support and the increasing number of children with special educational needs and disabilities which continue to rise due to factors such as increasing demand, complexity of need, internal external capacity and market stability issues in the independent sector. The budget strategy sets out a range of measures to close the gap and principles for how we spend, invest and be more efficient, and the report also sets out principles for a robust reserves policy to ensure resilience over this period, all of which still stand. The capital strategy covers the period 2022-23 to 2031-32 and details the high-level approach and framework that will underpin the development of the capital programme. It sets out the governance framework required to ensure the capital programme can be delivered and in a balanced way will support the delivery of the Council's objectives, key issues and risks that will impact on the delivery of the programme, and that all capital investment remains sustainable and affordable. The reports have been prepared in compliance with the relevant codes, and in developing the financial outlook, various assumptions have been made. These are modelling, planning assumptions which will be kept under constant review as we develop the revenue budgets and capital programme for the Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I'll now call Councillor Rippington to second the report, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Firstly, as a member of the Resources Task and Finish Group looking at the MTFP and the budget, I'd like to thank officers for the considerable amount of time and effort they have put into presenting the current position in a clear and understandable fashion. Unfortunately, that clarity has only helped to highlight what an extremely precarious position we've been left in by the pandemic. After 10 years of austerity, during which the officers of this authority have been asked time and again to produce savings and develop alternative ways of working to protect our most vital services, here they are again being asked to find £23 million of savings in the next year when the tank is already bone dry. Future years also require savings just to keep us where we are now, although with inflation rising and many other factors such as fuel and labour costs still unravelling, these estimates must be looked at as a best possible scenario unless we receive additional help. The financial position of the other core cities and indeed local authorities across the country is the same. Do whatever it takes was the mantra from this government in March 2020, and this council has done exactly that. We have protected as many of our citizens as possible from the ravaging effects of the pandemic, whether that be through our council tax reduction scheme, successful administration of huge amounts of grant funding, or the temporary ending of rough sleepers from the streets. Yet we have lost large amounts of revenue, and in the current financial settlement from government, that has not been recognised enough. To put it in terms that Margaret Thatcher would have approved of, our household income has been significantly reduced and our outgoing significantly increased. People ask me why our council tax continues to rise, but we don't see a corresponding improvement in services. The answer is, of course, that council tax has just been used to replace a shrinking government grant. With the council tax capped at 1.99% and inflation now running well above 3%, it is clear that we cannot keep pace with rising wages and costs. I draw your attention in particular to section 5.7 of this report. The spending envelope set out by the Chancellor in September is marginally less generous than those published in March 2020, which means, despite the substantial pressures placed on public services by the pandemic, the Chancellor is planning to spend no more overall than he was prior to COVID-19. I second this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call Councillor Mack to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to thank Councillor Trini and all of the officers that have worked on this. I support both the documents mostly. However, I have a few concerns. One key issue for me that stands out for me is the amount of reserves we're holding. Our reserve policy requires us to have 5 to 6% in general reserves. There is no suggestion of changing this policy, yet we currently hold nearly 10%, which is an extra £11.5 million. I realise we should not plug revenue gaps with reserves, but considering our post-pandemic position, the loss of rates and the increase in service demands, surely we spend some of this over the next few years to fill that gap. I think we are prioritising excessive financial prudency over delivering our much-needed essential services, such as social care, or reacting to the threat of the climate and ecological emergencies we're facing. Finance people will prioritise financial prudency and consider our capital as a city in terms of only our money. As politicians, we must take a much broader look at the risks for the coming years. My view is that forcing cuts to our statutory services when we hold so much in reserves will significantly reduce our resilience as a city. Or to put it in a more technical financial terms, the capital we hold within our people and within our environment. I don't think anyone could argue that we are currently giving adequate support in terms of mental health or social care in our city, or that we are doing enough to protect from future environmental shocks such as floods and heat waves. This is not just down to us. It is the fault of the cuts to our funding from national government, and we have a greater demand for child and adult social care, and each person receiving social care is costing the council more money than it used to. Each of these items that we look at as budget lines are actually people. It's about how we can support these people. Allowing cuts does not make us prudent as an authority. It is putting us at risk. We need to consider this human and environmental capital we hold as a city, and we need to consider the impact on our services have on each of these people needing support. We need to consider the risk of not providing that support and what that would cost us in the future if we do not protect our local and global environment. I don't think saving those financial reserves is really going to cover us in terms of risk. And then briefly on the capital strategy, we have concerns about the prioritisation of the Invest to Grow projects in a situation where we cannot afford our statutory services. We must focus on investing to save and investing to maintain so that we have those revenue in the future for those statutory services.
Thank you. And I'll now call Councillor Gollop to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can I just start by adding my thanks to Denise and the finance team for what is a remarkable paper, and the quality of the work and the professionalism that's gone into producing this is quite remarkable. And also, although I'm not going to agree with everything that Craig is suggesting or doing, I would like to thank Craig for his willingness to engage with the working group and allow a disclosure of information that is far more open than we had any right to expect. And I think that is a really constructive engagement process and one that has been fully appreciated across all members of that group. So what I'm about to say isn't a criticism of any of those involved in developing the report, but it is concerns that I share that I need to put on record. My Lord Mayor, this is really rather like a Christmas past the parcel, and every level there is another forfeit, and the forfeits get worse as we go through, so it's a matter of real concern. But the questions, Craig, for you and for Marvin, are that I have some difficulty. Should we be voting for a plan that doesn't balance? Should we be voting on a reserves policy that isn't actually quite clear in what it's trying to do and what it's trying to say? I look at this and say, is the school's deficit a real liability? If it is, we should be providing for it. If it's not, it shouldn't be an excuse to increase the reserves. It can't be both of those things. It has to be one or the other. And I cannot help but wondering why it is that we're not actually surprised that the adult social care budget keeps on growing. We have to confront that issue. And I'm not pointing the finger at Helen, because I know the problem is one of demand, not of how we manage it. But we have to budget for what it needs to be, and then we lobby and call for the funding, not actually putting in a budget that makes the medium-term financial plan nearer to balancing than it otherwise would be. I also want to mention, however, my Lord Mayor, the capital strategy. And I, like all members, I think welcome anything that increases the possibility that we might actually spend what we budget to spend on capital in the year that we budget to spend it. So that's something to be positive about. But there are concerns. Councillor Mack mentioned the proportion. 73% of spend is for invest to grow. Now, I think we should be looking much more at spend to save and much more at spend to maintain. I'm disappointed that we're not concentrating on overhead recovery and services we already charge for. And members raised further concerns that the capital strategy pays lip service to climate emergency. What percentage of
Councillor
projects...
Gollop, could you wind up, please?
Yes, certainly, Lord Mayor. What percentage of projects contribute to decarbonisation? What proportion mitigate the effects of climate change, flooding and heat waves? My Lord Mayor, all these matters, we cannot vote for this, but it would be wrong for us to vote against it, so we will be abstaining. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. And I now call Councillor Brown to speak on behalf of the Local Democrat Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. My speech is going to echo, in many respects, those of my colleagues on the Task and Finish Group, which has worked constructively on this and has had a lot of access to information from the officers, live data as it was being worked through and worked up, and that was very much appreciated. So, like my colleagues, I'd like to pay tribute to the officers for their openness and thank the Cabinet member as well for allowing that. One small matter of regret I had was that it would have been nice for the budget consultation for there to have been more input from the Task and Finish Group into that, in the same way as we've had through the HRA consultation with your colleague in Housing. With regards to the paper, I do have reservations as well. I don't think that fully levels with the Chamber or the public quite the scale of the challenge. In order to reach those 23 million, we're going to have to consider an awful lot of unpalatable things. And when we come to the budget, it's not going to be a fun experience when we come back here in February. It's going to impact on all areas of council services and staff, not just for this year, but for years to come. The biggest challenge, as has already been said, biggest areas of spending, adult social care and education, particularly SEND, where the full scale of required spending is not clear due to the number of outstanding EHCP assessments, So even before we consider the 23 million shortfall, we need to consider the possibility that the actual budget needs will be greater. Similar point to the point Councillor Gallup was making. At the same time as funding the budget gap, though, we are increasing our allocation to reserves by 12 million. And on this point, I am confused, because it's now the time to increase our reserves. Surely if increases in reserves now increases the funding gap, and if a higher level of reserves are now required, why are we proposing to go back to a lower level of reserves in future? Surely if we've come across an experience where we need a higher level of reserves, that should be then, that is either required, and we're normally budgeting for less than we require, or it's not required, in which case we should be spending it, or at least looking to minimise cuts. Sorry, I'm now having IT issues. Another area of concern that I have is our exposure to debt made to our arm's length companies, 54 million. And after having lost in excess of 40 million in Bristol Energy, this is an area that requires ongoing scrutiny. I'm not naive enough to believe that had that 40 million not been spent in Bristol Energy, it would all be available to spend now. But if some of it had made its way into reserves, we might have had an easier time in looking at this medium-term financial plan and looking at the budgeting going forward. I notice the time is up. We will be noting and supporting the noting and approval of the paper, but with reservations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cheney, do you want to respond to the debate?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose just to clarify the point on the reserve, so there's a combination of things going on there, not least that money will be spent in the coming year and that it just sits there. It happens to fall over the April period. So this is COVID funding essentially that will be distributed next year. Most of the points raised actually relate to next year's budget rather than the MTFP itself, which is trying to outline where we're at right now and what we think that the future will look like. So thank you all for your comments. Nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to move to the vote. The recommendation, as displayed on the screens, is to note items 1, 2 and 3 in the report and to approve items 4 and 5. And just to be clear, this will be one vote on all of those recommendations together. It's an electronic vote, so please vote now. Okay, so we have 48 votes for the recommendations, 1 against and 14 abstentions. So those recommendations are carried.
Tim Kent.
I don't know.
Councillor Kent.
Councillor Kent, how many years have you sat in this chamber? Right.
The reasoning power goes eventually.
Let's move on. Agenda item 12 is the revised criteria for the appointment of honorary aldermen and alderwomen. The details are set out in the report. This is essentially a minor change to the wording. So I move the report and recommendations, and I call Deputy Lord Mayor Councillor Varney to second the report.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I rise to second the report, reserving my remarks.
Thank you very much. There'll be no debate on this item, so we move straight to the vote on the recommendation that full council approves the revised criteria set out in the report. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Any against? Thank you. Then those revised criteria are adopted. And we move to agenda item 13, which is the half-year report of the Audit Committee. And ask Councillor Hopkins, please, to introduce the report. Councillor Hopkins, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Firstly, I have to say that the vast majority of our new councillors have worked hard and effectively to participating in the lengthy training and taking up the challenge very well. My colleague Tony will cover...
Sorry, Councillor Hopkins, it's quite difficult to have the mic. I'm not sure the mic's picking you up very well. Can you point it any more directly towards you? Or
might pick me up better. My colleague Tony will cover a number of reports from our internal auditors that have given concern, and I will concentrate on the Bristol energy reports. Back in 2010, £3 million was obtained from the European Union to set up a combined energy services and supply company. essentially to encourage local microgeneration, solar, wind, etc., and energy efficiency, and to make a package for local customers with energy supply. Later, in 2015, the then Mayor produced a plan for an energy retailer with all of the other functions deleted. The contrast between the 2010 bid and the Council report back to Europe on what they had done with the money is startling, but as our auditors say, there was no explanation for the change. It is certainly not the case that everyone was convinced. In discussion, I heard cogent and dire warnings from ex-councillor Alistair Watson, amongst others, and whilst I was not of the school that predicted the inevitable doom, I raised concerns with the Deputy Mayor about how we would stop things if it started going wrong. No call-in was allowed for concerned councillors to challenge and examine. Well, it did go wrong in a very big way, and the opportunity were ignored to limit the losses. The erstwhile Deputy Mayor is now in a new position, recognised the horror of it, but was hampered in speaking out himself. I have found the excuses still being given of social value added particularly galling. Reports showed high pay to unaccountable senior staff and 80% of the customers being outside Bristol. Our independent auditors' 2 reports make a list of vital governance improvements which have been enthusiastically endorsed by the Audit Committee and incidentally by this full council, half of them last year. I strongly recommend that these reports should be required reading for all councillors. We've all got different interests in why we're here, but if we lose £40 to £50 million of council payers' money, services are very much poorer as a result. We must never allow this to happen again, and we have here a classic example of the dangers of the mayor's system. The first with rose-tinted glasses, and the present mayor completely clueless with what to do as £1 million a month of taxpayers' cash was thrown against the wall.
Thank you very much. And can I call Councillor Goodman, please, to speak on behalf of the Labour Group? The report is for noting, so it's not being seconded.
Hello, thanks. I think I'll sit down, it's probably a bit easier. Yeah, I'd like to, like my other colleagues, thank the internal audit team and external auditors for their hard work in preparing the reports for Audit Committee, and for the committee members in assisting the audit process, particularly the independent audit committee members and the longer-standing councillor members who've been able to provide continuity and background for us newer members with a lot of patience and support at times. I'd like to thank the internal audit team in particular for their openness to committee members and their provision of training to us, including bringing in a very experienced external trainer. Key issues have been highlighted by the Audit Committee. Progress is being made and will continue to be monitored, including on the consistency in risk management, cybersecurity, IT transformation and governance arrangements for the Council's subsidiaries, amongst others. I look forward to continuing this work alongside my colleagues and commend the report to full Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I call Councillor Dyer, please, to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The Audit Committee, in its 3 sessions so far, has looked at 22 separate reports, multiple sub-reports, and we also have had additional briefings from officers. To help us with, as Councillor Goodman referred to, we have had some pretty substantial training, which, when I explained how much training we were getting audit to some other councillors, they were somewhat surprised, and I hope that we can make some of that training available to other councillors as well, to help them understand what the work that we are doing for audit. Because of the way audit works, we often are looking at areas in which the council has not provided a level of assurance that is necessarily what we are looking for. So we have looked at areas such as adult safeguarding, affordable housing delivery, and IT-related issues, including cybersecurity. We have reviewed and we've had some very good presentations from officers. As Councillor Goodman mentioned, they have been very responsive to our questions. We are a new committee. All but one, which is the chair, Councillor Hopkins, of the members of this committee are newly elected. Therefore, we have been very reliant on the internal auditors and external auditors to provide us with information and to respond to questions in order for us to be able to audit and scrutinise and review the information presented to us. What I would also like to say is that there are many recommendations that are being made. It is important that we understand and accept those recommendations and implement them. With other hats on, I'm seeing some of this work already being done, and we need obviously to follow it through. I think what we have learnt, not just since the election, but before that there are areas of concern, and that if we are going to thrive as an organisation, able to deliver to Bristol the services it's required, then we need to ensure that we improve our governance structures, the way we manage our risk, the way we control management decisions in order to make sure that they are done in a right and proper manner. I would like to thank all of the audit members for their efforts. I think it's important that audit has cross-party support, not just from those members attending audit, but the ability to go to other members with more experience so we can ask them for their input, even if we don't always necessarily agree with their conclusions. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. And I'll now call Councillor Hooker to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Over the period covered by the report, the committee has received and considered a significant amount of detailed technical information, and I think its deliberations have been carried out in a spirit of cross-party cooperation and goodwill. And that indeed was something I think which Councillor Dyer alluded to. All of us on the committee wish to see the most effective internal controls, risk management procedures and governance arrangements in place. It is, of course, critical that the recommendations in the Grant Thornton report concerning the governance arrangements of Bristol Energy are implemented in full. Such a catastrophic waste of taxpayers' money must never be allowed to happen again. Most of the internal audit reports have offered reasonable assurance, which is satisfactory. However, in several areas, only limited assurance has been given, and this is obviously a cause for concern. We must remain sighted on the improvements required in these areas and track their delivery. I recognise that internal audit has faced challenges around resourcing, and I would like to thank the Chief Internal Auditor and his team for their assiduous work. I am pleased to note that the work of the Counter Fraud and Investigations team continues to contribute significant benefits across the Council. Total savings in both cash terms and the value of property recovered over the period amounted to over £1 million. I would therefore like to thank this team for their highly effective action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hopkins, as mover of the report, would you like to say anything in response to the debate?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As has been said and repeated, we are working together well as a team. We did have a debate at our last meeting because just before we debated our report, was brought to my attention by members of the committee an interview that had been given to the press, which was from Councillor Cheney, and basically that caused us a great deal of concern, where there seemed to be disrespect of the auditors and disrespect for the way that they'd actually done things. And we had received lots of very reassurances from members when the matters from the Audit Committee, from the auditors were raised, that things were improving, and we set in stone, we thought, a system. I'm glad to say that the committee having agreed to write to Councillor Cheney I got a reply yesterday where he was rowing back from some of those comments, but also suggesting that he might have been misrepresented by the press. That we will see. But it's absolutely important that we all take on board the comments made by the independent auditors, because if we don't, we've learnt nothing.
Yeah,
so you wanted to respond to that,
right
having been named.
Yeah, thank you. So I didn't row back from any comments, Gary, and as I mentioned in my reply to you, I was either misrepresented or misunderstood in my comments. I was actually agreeing with the auditor's report. There's certainly no disrespect for the work that they've done there, as I explained in my email, and you've just misrepresented there. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. The recommendation, as displayed on the screen at the moment, is that the report is noted, and so Council notes the report. And that concludes agenda item 13. We move now to item 14, the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report for 2020-21. Councillor Cheney, would you like to introduce the report?
It's just the most thrilling day for all of you, I can tell. And not only that, it's a Treasury Management Mid-Year Report, which I know is one of those that everyone always avidly waits for. So, yeah, I won't go on for 3 minutes, just if that makes you feel any better. This report meets the Treasury Management regulatory requirement that the Council receive a mid-year Treasury review report. There are no policy changes. The details in this report update the position in light of the updated economic position and budgetary changes. I probably won't actually say very much more than that. I'm sure you've all read it. I'm just pleased to recommend it to full Council today.
Thank you very much. There is no debate on this item. So the recommendation is that Council notes the report, and it is noted. We're now going to have an adjournment for 20 minutes. Refreshments for councillors will be served in group rooms along the corridor as advised, and there's also space in the conference hall if people wish to spread out. Please be back in your seats by, let's say, 5:10 in order to continue, please. Thank you. Okay, welcome back everybody. We're going to make a start, so please take your seats. Thank you. Right, we are, I'm pleased to say, ahead of schedule, for which I thank everybody. However, to consider the motions on the paper is going to go beyond the 30 minutes allowed in the Constitution to do so. So having consulted with party group leaders and/or whips during the break, I'm going to propose that we extend time to cover both gold and silver motions on the paper, which should take a total of around about an hour. Can anyone, those in favour say aye? Aye. Excellent, okay. In which case, let's move to agenda item 15, the golden motion on the governance of Bristol City Council. And I'll call Councillor Hartley of the Liberal Democrat Group to propose the motion. Councillor Hartley, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. For the last 10 years, Bristol has undergone an experiment in city governance following a local referendum. This referendum passed on a very low turnout, meaning only 13% of Bristolians voted for the mayoral system. Hardly a compelling mandate. Many people voted for a mayoral system in order to improve the governance of the city due to perceived instability. A history lesson for members. The instability was primarily the cause of repeated Labour resignations from power in the mid-2000s, that and having elections to council every year. As a council working cross-party, we were able to deliver for Bristol, redeveloping Cannons Marsh and Broadmead, improving our waste services, some of the best in the country, and building more affordable homes than under either of our two mayors. Neighbourhood partnerships allowed local people to participate in their communities in an active and engaged way. Since the mayoral model came in, we have seen, among other disasters, the loss of nearly 50 million on an energy company, embarrassing court defeats costing many millions over illegal cuts to send provision, the arena fiasco, and Bristol residents being ignored over Cumberland Basin and RPZs. This will be enough for most objective observers to at least acknowledge that this leadership model is not working as hoped. But the usual mayoral cheerleaders, the current mayor himself, big business, and major property developers are out in force now to defend the system that benefits them so much. One person cannot hope to have the breadth of knowledge and time that is required to run a complex city like Bristol, as well as listen to the views of local residents, especially when they have a side gig as a director of a local film studio. It is fundamentally wrong that one person can overrule the will of a majority of elected councillors, as happened over the arena. One person now effectively rules with absolute power. I will remind councillors of the old adage, absolute power corrupts absolutely. In 2017, we elected our Metro Mayor for the West of England, who fulfills the duties of cheerleader-in-chief for the region, as well as controlling transport skills and house building. We are now in the absurd position of having two mayors, with the Bristol mayor now being the spare mayor. Our preferred replacement is the committee system, which is fairer, more proportional and conducive to a long-term strategy for improving Bristol. By allowing councillors to work together on cross-party committees, we can improve that governance while allowing for everyone to have a voice in a proportional and balanced way. It will mean that no one person will be able to single-handedly make decisions that affect all Bristolians, and that the vote of all councillors will mean something, unlike the charade of the council vote on the city centre arena. A move to a committee system will ensure greater transparency and accountability around council decisions. It will also involve a wider cross-section of voices being heard and engaged in the whole decision-making process, and be much more open to engagement and scrutiny, more importantly, by members of the public. All of us here in this chamber serve at the pleasure of our residents, and they deserve to have their voice heard. It is time for the people of Bristol to have the opportunity to reflect on the last 10 years, and now that they have the evidence, give them a chance to vote on the mayoral model and to scrap the mayor. If the mayor and Labour members...
Councillor Hartley, can you wind up now, please?
Yeah. If the mayor and Labour members are so confident in the mayoral model, then surely they think they'll win the referendum, and they should take up the challenge and vote for this motion. I implore all members to vote for this motion and help to bring greater democracy and accountability back to Bristol. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll now call Councillor Pulteney of the Green Group to second the motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I rise to second my colleague's motion. 10 years ago, 24% of the eligible voters of Bristol voted in a referendum to decide how our city would be run. Just shy of 13% of them voted for a change, for a system of having the city run by a single elected mayor. And proponents of this system said that it would increase accountability, that it would unlock millions of pounds of investment from central government, that it would enable us to deliver large-scale long-term projects like an arena. That was 10 years ago. And people have now seen the reality of the mayoral system. It's now time to give the people of Bristol the opportunity to revisit that decision and to make a choice, not on the basis of promises, but on the basis of the evidence before their eyes. As Greens, and the same things happen to me. As Greens, we support giving people a voice in the decisions that affect the city and their lives. And this motion invites us to imagine what could be achieved if the Council's policies were motivated by the desire to fix the issues that we see every day in our communities. This is one of those ideas that sounds quite radical in this building. I promise you it sounds blindingly obvious to everyone outside it. What my colleague has put forward is a return not to the past, but to something more exciting. Not a return to leader in cabinet, which would still be preferable to a mayor, but a committee system that rewards consensus. Councillors working together with each other to champion the communities they represent, enhancing democracy, delivering real scrutiny, a system that would empower people and bring the voices of every neighbourhood and every community of our city into the policy-making process. I see from the panicked pieces that have appeared in the media in the last week that the Labour administration have already begun trying to frame the referendum debate. Council, democracy is not in opposition to ambition. Democracy is essential. Apologies. Democracy leads to better outcomes, and the party opposite should have more faith in the people of Bristol and more confidence in its own ideas. A committee system means that good ideas can thrive through debate and discussion and, dare I say it, working together to find common ground. That's what will deliver the long-term policy commitments that let our partners plan with certainty. What a committee system would not allow, however, is a single, unaccountable decision-maker to blindly storm ahead, ignoring, patronising or steamrolling over local communities and calling that leadership. Instead, we would have to find agreement and compromise in a system that would reward those that can articulate and persuade the city that they have the better vision. Bristol deserves another say on how our city is governed. I have faith in Bristol to make choices for itself. The question is, does the party opposite? I urge you all to vote for the motion.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to debate on the motion, and I'll call Councillor Pearce to speak on behalf of the Labour Group. Councillor Pearce, you have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Hopefully my technology won't let me down. So we reach the high point, what should be the high point of the city's monthly civic life, debates in full council. How are we spending it? We're contemplating our own navel. We've just had an election. The public was so incensed at the mayor that he was returned. They were so determined to eliminate the office that the two parties most committed to doing so couldn't muster 30% of the vote. Nonetheless, Liberal Democrat colleagues have brought this motion. Conservative colleagues, the evidence of petitions that they've set would suggest that this isn't exactly what they had in mind, this motion. Greens, we may or may not see a settled view amongst them this evening. Meanwhile, the Labour Mayor, his administration and the Labour Party are trying to deliver against our many serious challenges in the city. What does the city really need us to address? Well, we could be discussing a cost of living crisis, a response to the city's response to COP26, an environmental emergency, an ecological emergency, a housing crisis, a public health crisis. Yes, COVID's still around. A response to the refugee crisis, government funding of public transport, and whether it will be enough to keep the buses running.
Last month, my party was prevented from debating the social care crisis. Hopefully, we'll get round to that this evening now that we've voted to extend time. What, are we addressing these issues? No. We're focused this evening on internal processes. This is the most important decade of modern human civilization. The most important decade, which ends at 2030. We need clear and decisive action, not the bargaining of parochial interests. Today, we've been reduced to talking about expending energy, time, and no small amount of treasure on belly button fluff.
Thank you. I now call Councillor McCarthy of the Green Group, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. After almost 10 years, this issue here is, do we want a referendum to ask the people of Bristol if they want a mayor or committee system? Or do they want a single personality like a mayor to control most city decisions for 4 years uncurbed? Or do we want your own voice to be heard? The Green Party also believes that local authority run by directly elected mayor are not the best interest of local democracy. They take decision-making power, taking power away from the councillor and the council as a whole, and place them in hand of few individuals, even just one person, leading to the disfranchisement of those councillors who are not in the ruling party and the citizens they represent. However, we do agree with the democracy, and if the people of Bristol want elected mayor, we will field a candidate who will positively raise to the challenge and bring more positive green policies and participation options like a citizen assembly we initiate. I really do believe that you should vote for this motion because the committee system will provide direct member involvement in decision-making, means that the process of governing the city would be most democratic and accountable, and a committee system does give a louder voice to minority parties and independents and more power to elected councillors. Currently, the Green Party has equal number of councillors to the Labour Party, representing ward around Bristol City, and yet not one cabinet members are and no real steer on local policy and decision-making practice, because policy developments always brought for timely cross-party scrutiny input. In fact, the Labour Party also have 24 councillors, most of them disposed of power by the mayor, with only a handful of Labour councillors in his cabinet making decisions. So it is also your voice and those you represent not being heard. I will tell you now, undemocratically, I will tell you how undemocratically this is. Your voice not being heard regarding livable neighborhood, high-rise building, school places, green space, air quality, serious ambition of climate change, and strategy of decent public transport system. I hope you are listening at home, because we need you to hear this debate and consider the democracy which is at stake. Here, the Labour Party, who you have trusted to represent you, would prefer to be led by majority of one person only. Do you want single personality like a mayor to control most city decisions for 4 years? Or do you want your own voice to be heard? Vote for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I now call Councillor Weston to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor, and no poetry, you'll be happy to hear. Maybe later. Councillor Pearce makes some interesting comments, some of which he's right on, some of which I'm afraid we're going to disagree on. You list an awful lot of things that are important. You are correct. In almost every one of them, I would say you are correct. About all of them. You are also correct when you say the next decade is possibly the most important that we're going to have this century. But I think every decade says that. What, though, you're not correct on is dismissing so lightly democracy. Because actually, the next decade itself, globally, is going to be defined by a clash of ideals and a clash of systems, and one of which is democracy and accountability. We saw that rumble through the noughties, we saw that rumble through into the teens, and now it's going on. To try and dismiss so lightly concerns about an arbitrary political system is unfounded and unfair. The mayoral model is designed to ride roughshod over democracy. Those aren't my words, they're the words of Karen Smith MP from your party. And if you raise the Prime Minister has more checks and balances on his authority than the Mayor does here, because the Prime Minister could be removed by his own party. If all of you disagree with the Mayor, he still can do whatever he likes. There is no check or balance in the system. Now, regardless of who is in the chair, the system itself is flawed. And surely you will recognise that. Now, there is no doubt, of the systems we have on offer, our preference would be the Cabinet and the leader model. However, what we can all agree on this side is that the weakest system is the mayoral one. It is the one with the least amount of accountability and oversight. So we are going to be backing the motion today. Now, in 2012, when the referendum was put, we were in a completely different situation. Since then, two things have changed. We had the instability because we had constant elections. The two things have changed. We have the Weckermere and the regional governments. We know that that is the driver the government is looking at. And we've seen what happens up in Birmingham and in Manchester, and we can see the goal there. But the stability has come from councillors being all out elected. I hate to say it, but occasionally Councillor Kent was right. Because like Nostradamus in the corner, an orange Nostradamus, he actually said that they would do it. And I'm never going to repeat this again. It tastes like vinegar. But he was correct in that. The situation has changed. So what we're saying now is we need to look again and ask the public for a change of system. One that I believe will be fairer. One that I believe will give a greater voice to councillors, to communities, to the suburbs, which all too often feel ignored. So my group will be backing this motion today, wholeheartedly. And to be honest, you really should too. And I look forward to going on the campaign trail with Karen Smith MP. That'll be an interesting turn of events. I'm sure she's looking forward to it as well. Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. I now call Councillor Varney to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. As I mentioned during my statement in Members' Forum earlier today, I don't think Bristolians realised quite how much power they were handing over to one person when a tiny fraction of them narrowly voted to launch the mayoral experiment 10 years ago. If, at that time, they had been told that votes in full council would be ignored, if they had been told that city elites would have a seat at the top table, while ordinary people and their directly elected representatives would be marginalised, if they had been told that decisions would be made behind closed doors with little accountability and scrutiny, I think the results of that mayoral referendum would have been very different indeed. Now, proponents of the mayoral experiment claim that highly visible leadership is good for the city, but it is also very, very good for the holder of the post. Having a directly elected mayor risks having a leader who is less interested in serving the people of Bristol and rather more interested in feathering their own nest and using the position as a springboard to furthering their own careers. Those in favour of the mayoral experiment also point to strong leadership as a plus point. But what is strong about insulting your opponents here in the chamber and blocking them on Twitter? What is strong about stuffing your cabinet with an ever-dwindling supply of yes people from your own benches while ignoring the talent that exists on all benches here in this chamber for fear of being contradicted? That is not strength, that is weakness. Supporters of the mayoral experiment also say that holding a referendum will be an unnecessary expense at a time of budgetary constraints. But I ask you, can we afford not to hold it? In recent years, we've seen an inordinate amount of waste. Poor decision-making has cost all of us dearly, with tens of millions of pounds wasted on failed vanity projects such as Bristol Energy and Bristol Arena. Under a mayoral system of governance, we were unable to stop these poor decisions and unable to prevent so much waste. Fellow councillors, do not despair. Luckily, in the Localism Act of 2011, former Liberal Democrat leader of the council, Baroness Barbara Jank, had the foresight to include a mechanism allowing for referenda on abolishing directly elected mayors after a period of 10 years. Next May will be the 10th anniversary of the mayoral experiment here in Bristol. At that point, I think it's reasonable and appropriate to go back to the people of Bristol and ask them if they want to continue with it or if they want to consign it to the dustbin of history where it belongs. I urge you to vote for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call Councillor Cole to speak on behalf of the Labour Group. Councillor Cole, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So we should all want the most democratic process to choose how the city is run. Having people choose their city leader themselves is the most democratic way to do this. Bristolians should not just be given the binary choice of between a mayor and a committee system. They should have all the options in front of them. And once they have explored them, whichever they decide is best for the city should be what is on the referendum. In 2012, Bristol held a mayoral referendum, as we know. And yes, the mayoral system was chosen. The introduction of the mayoral system gave all residents in the city the opportunity to participate in a process that elects the mayor of Bristol, one of the most influential positions in the city. Okay? So this changed the system from the system which meant that the leader of the council was voted on by the council members, excluding direct participation from the majority of residents. As it stands, the committee system would select a leader in exactly the same way, disempowering residents. There would definitely be a reduction in the number of citizens engaged in the process to elect the leader of the council. The process of direct election shows each resident that they are respected and valued. It's in the candidate's interest to communicate with them, and as many residents as possible are being encouraged to vote and exercise their democratic right. When compared to the elections of MPs, the mayoral elections has a higher turnout. And just like MPs, residents have the power to remove the mayor at the next election if they don't deliver. The committee system does not give direct opportunity to residents to remove the leader of the council if they don't deliver. During the last election, some parties said, if elected, they would remove the mayoral system. Despite this being their headline policy, they only got 29% of the vote between them. Petitions seeking resident support have not raised the required numbers to trigger a debate. This suggests that right now, there's no public appetite for a referendum. If that is the case, then holding one now would be self-indulgent. As councillors, we should unite on delivering Bristol's priorities. Our citizens are stakeholders in our city. They are the people who elect us. They are the people who we say we serve. It is not fair for them to be given just these two options. Bristol is much more than City Hall, which should not affect what we debate here, but also the 340,000 people who have a right to vote and have a right to say who leads us, and not just the 70 who sit in this room today.
Thank you very much. And I now call Councillor Stone of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I support thoroughly the need to hold a referendum, and I applaud the Liberal Democrat Party to bring this motion to full council. Look, life's a bit of an experiment, in my opinion, and maybe it is time to review this model and make the people of Bristol, ask the people of Bristol, I should say, for maybe a more democratic form of governance. Because the Green Party will welcome that, as it is, and as it is the most important decade. All citizens need to be heard with a governance that actually does get stuff done. Because believe it or not, it does. It's not just the mayoral model that gets things done. As a part of a party, as a part of the Green Party, I'm proud to support the less vocal. We encourage discussion and argument. We welcome as many people to the table as we possibly can to participate in grown-up debates. Unlike other parties who mostly whip their members on any important decision and hide behind the mayor for accountability. Do you know what? I can smell blood sometimes in this room. Personally, I prefer to clean my own belly button than be whipped. As for you, as you've heard, the Green Party believes that local authorities run by directly elected mayors are not in the best interest of local democracy, and that councillors in the committee system are directly accountable to the residents. Surely that must be a better system for our citizens of Bristol. However, we do uphold democracy and the democratic practices. And if the people of Bristol want an elected mayor, if they want it, probably they can have it. Yeah, and if the people want an elected mayor, then they can have it. So bring it on. Though you know that will cause an absolute media frenzy. And I see series 2 of Squid Games emerging, to be honest with you. However, I would also like you to appreciate that if there was a Green Mayor, I'm sure they would throw the ring into the volcano of Mordor and happily rescind their powers. There will be more accountability with terms of reference and not a revolving door of transport cabinet members. What is it? 6 in 6 years. As you may guess, I really do believe that this motion should be positively supported and voted for, because it will allow the people of Bristol the opportunity to embrace a better democracy. Thank you. Please vote for this motion.
Thank you very much. I now call Councillor Eddy to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Lord Mayor, before I start my speech, I just want to reply to something that Councillor Cole said regarding the appetite for change here in Bristol. I'll be honest, every time I go out in my ward, to the local shops, to the news agency, the question I'm asked the most is, well, Richard, when can I get the chance to get rid of this mayor? There is a real appetite, a hunger for change in this city. Lord Mayor, experience provides some helpful insights. Having originally been elected 30 years ago in May next year, almost a third of my time was spent with the previous committee system. Over a third of my time has been spent under the leader and cabinet model, and the remainder under the mayoral model, of course. At the start, we had a strong Labour council with a strong Tory opposition. We then entered a period of almost one-party state. Labour had a massive majority of over 50 seats, and the two opposition parties single-figure tellers. By 2004, Labour had lost its dominance and its majority. We had a rainbow cabinet of the three parties, in which I was privileged to serve for 18 months. For the remainder of the 2000s and noughties, we had the seesaw of minority Labour and Lib Dem councils before the Lib Dems won a small working majority. Of course, the coalition government held referenda in 10 cities in 2012, of which Bristol was the only one to consent to the mayoral experiment. I strongly believe the reason the majority of Bristol electors and myself sadly voted then for the mayoral model was because we understood the arguments that it would give more transparent leadership and avoid the political indecision of noughties. Of course, as, for example, Councillor Weston has mentioned, the Council has since embraced the all-up 4-yearly elections, ending at a stroke the tendencies of all political administrations to be guided by next May's deemed popularity. This Council debated a similar motion to today's Gordon motion in March. But of course, in May, over half the councillors were newly elected. So you didn't have a chance to be asked your views about a mayoral referendum. I imagine everyone elected in May did so on the basis of changing for the better their local community.
Councillor Eddy, could you wind up, please?
I shall, Lord Mayor. It well came to a shock for all of you that, frankly, we have very little power. The Mayor has 95%. So I believe there's less transparency, less accountability and less democracy than ever. Clearly, we need to change. The elected Mayor, frankly, is election by elected dictator. Support today's Gordon motion, please.
Thank you, and I now call Councillor Clark on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. Thank you for all your contributions to the debate today. It has been interesting to hear a range of differing views and perspectives. I'm acutely aware that I'm the last speaker today, and it seems to be as usual actually, before the summing up, and much has been said already, but I just wanted to make a couple of points. This motion is an opportunity to ask the city how we want to govern our city after 10 years of the mayoral system. The motion is not about personality or individuals. This referendum is about asking the public how they want to see their city run in the future. Our motion asks the public to support a different model of governance, and the committee system is a democratic way of making evidence-based decisions. Residents do not like the fact that councillors vote and are seen to be making a decision. For instance, we have the arena debacle, which has been spoken about already, on Temple Island. And almost immediately after that vote in full council in support of the arena down at Temple Island, The decision was to build it at Filton. I would also like to thank, at this point, former Liberal Democrat councillor leader Baroness Jank for making it possible for us to have this citywide conversation in the form of a referendum. So thank you, Barbara, for all your work. And finally, I respect the fact that the Labour group decided not to submit their amendment calling for a referendum and proposing the cabinet model. This was surprising as they voted against this model only just a few months ago. Unsurprisingly, my group and myself will be supporting this motion to start the conversation with the whole city. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. That concludes the debate. Councillor Hartley, as mover of the motion, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to firstly thank my colleagues in Lib Dem, Conservative and Green groups for their support for this motion. To the Labour group, rather than try to convince you myself, I hope the thoughts of Labour politicians on the mayoral system will convince you instead. Former Labour Cabinet member and councillor Paul Smith said, backbench councillors are like mere window dressing. Former Labour councillor Mike Davis said, under the mayoral system, so much experience, talent and expertise has gone wasted. Former Labour councillor Jo Sargent said she'd be campaigning for a committee system which enables true democracy and accountability. And former Labour councillor Harriet Bradley said local democracy is threatened by the institution of the mayoralty. Your former colleagues understand that we need a referendum. Earlier, Councillor Pearce said that we need clear and decisive action. Well then, Steve, support this motion, put the issue to bed in a referendum, then we can move on clearly and decisively. Both the Labour speakers said there's no public support for a referendum. Well, echoing Councillor Eddy, many residents of my ward have repeatedly asked me when we can get rid of the mayoral system. Of the 32 public statements in public forum this evening on this motion, only one supported the mayoral system, and that was from a business lobby group. The people of Bristol want and deserve this referendum. I compel members this evening to back democracy, back accountability, back good governance and back this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Rees, would you like to respond to the debate?
So, with all the mayors around the world, I didn't know that we were working together to undermine democracy, the 300 city networks that are around there. So, look, let me start by saying I've already been clear that I am not standing again. So I'm not talking about my future within the city, despite one of the councillors' statements. I'm talking about the future of city. It's also worth pointing out, just as a matter of knowledge and improving the quality of debate, the Metro Mayor is not the same as the City Mayor. It's a very different role. They have the same word, but it's not the same role. And it's really important that as we talk to the city, we are clear about that. I'd also just remind you, I'm really interested in all these conversations people are having about the mayor. I went to the Wetherspoons pub just a few weeks ago after Remembrance Day. None of the squaddies in the pub were talking to me about the mayoral model. And Paul Hassan posted on Facebook, is this pantomime season? And I think that really captures it. Look, first off, if I could just work through these things. We face challenges in Bristol right now, as been set out: adult social care, cost of living crisis, housing crisis, climate change, ecological emergency, COVID recovery. We could be debating those challenges here today. Instead, we're talking about ourselves. And actually, if you want an example of what happens when the council gets together and talks about itself rather than the mayoral model, which I think has liberated political leadership to engage with the city, it is right here this evening. Rather than those crises, we are talking about internal structures and processes. And the second thing I'd say on the substance is this. The question is not what makes us comfortable. The question is what model of leadership will enable us to deliver the challenges at the scale and pace they are facing us right now. Ecological emergency, climate emergency, inequality, the global migration crisis, housing crisis. No one has asked the question, what model of governance will enable us to deliver the challenges Bristol faces right now? And actually, form follows function. We need to deliver a model that will enable us to deliver the urgency of those challenges right now. If you ask that question in an honest way, fill your boots. If you think that the committee system would deliver that leadership with that pace, then great, make the argument. But please don't do a disservice to those people in the city who have fled oppressive regimes and dictatorships by claiming that they're here in Bristol. If you talk to some of my friends who have come to this city and you start talking to them about despotism and Stalinism and all that type of stuff that I'm supposed to embody, it's an absolute insult to people who have made their way through refugee camps. Don't do that. Secondly, sorry, I'm running out of time, Lord Mayor, but look, I mean, there's so much to say here. Democracy, again, invisibility of decision-making is one of the ways to undermine democracy. You have visible leadership in the mayoral model. People want to know when they can get rid of me. They had a chance in May. And then now I'll be gone in 2024. One of the things that you're talking about here is taking away a vote from the people of Bristol to choose who their political leadership is. What will happen is the decisions over leadership or non-leadership will happen in this room, and the inability to make decisions will be made anonymously in committee rooms in this building, just like they used to. And I've lived in this city for a long time. I worked under the leadership that people have talked about. I worked under Councillor Hopkins. And in my time working in the NHS and working at the council, look, I don't want to burst any bubbles, but we were not a smooth delivering city that was breaking ground and building national reputation for delivery. That history just never, ever existed.
You are running out of time, or have run out of time. So.
Okay. Can I just make one final point, and I'll just choose this one carefully. A lot of people have talked about delivery. Again, there was no history of delivery. Many of the controversies that we face right now are because we are getting stuff done, whether it be building houses, putting in pedestrianisation, the clean air zone, the bus gates, tackling child hunger, revamping the whole housing letting system. Stuff is happening. To say that it's not, it's just flatly untrue. Okay. So let's have the debate, but let's make it a mature debate in which we're really honest about the ups and downs of the different options that we face.
I think the point's made. Thank you very much. Right, okay. We're going to move to the vote now. This is going to be an electronic vote. As soon as we are ready. Please vote now. Okay, so we have 41 votes for, 24 against and 2 abstentions, so the motion is carried. Thank you. We're going to move straight on to the silver motion. And I call Councillor Holland on behalf of the Labour Group to move the motion, please. Councillor Holland, you have 3 minutes.
Thanks, Lord Mayor, and follow that. So settle down, everybody. Let's talk about something that really impacts on Bristol and the problems that we've got at the moment. And thank you, all of you, for making time to have this debate this afternoon. I noticed that the public gallery is already emptying, but the third time lucky. And this motion was initially solely about the government's disability strategy, which came out in July, and I don't need to rehearse the shortcomings of that strategy and the anger that disabled people and the organisations that represented them felt about that strategy. And I'm sure that many of you, like I did, had representations from local people and local organisations about that strategy. I mean, the main thing was it just failed to engage with disabled people and disabled people's organisations to find out what they actually want. And what the government called a once-in-a-lifetime plan, in fact, had been seen before, and many of the elements of it have been being called for decades, not just within the last few years. So it's not as innovative as it was proclaimed. And many elements of that strategy are already in place through voluntary action. Of course, one of the big things it did was to fail to say how all this was going to be funded, which brings me on to the amended version of my motion that I put in, which talks about the social care cap. And that's obviously, since the first time that I put it in, the government has made the announcements, which has meant that the Prime Minister can tick that box, that he's delivered on what he said he was going to, that he'd got an oven-ready plan when he first stood on the steps of Downing Street, but it's a little bit late, and frankly, colleagues, it's a bit short on detail. Whilst we as all support the vision that is spelt out in the plan, those who follow what we've been doing in Bristol over the last 4 years will recognise much of that. People having choice and control and support to live independent lives is one element. People can access outstanding quality and tailored care and support. People find adult social care fair and accessible. Those are the very things that we've been working on for the last 4 years, and we've had some success in doing it. But colleagues, here's the rub, those things do not come free. And I think the government makes a big mistake, as frankly do some in the health partners that we have, about assuming that voluntary organisations mean you don't have to pay for it. Actually supporting voluntary organisations to do more of what they already do in a fantastic way in Bristol is really at the heart of this. So I'm grateful for the observations that we've had later. I think Jeff has gone, but the acknowledgement that we haven't budgeted properly for adult social care and the real costs.
Councillor Hong, could you wind up now, please?
I will do. So please support this motion. Thank you for letting us hear it this afternoon. And I hope that it will receive cross-party support. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now call Councillor Ali of the Labour Group to second the motion.
Hi, sorry. Is it okay if I sit? Oh, okay.
Members should stand to when you're speaking, if that's okay.
She's pregnant, Lord Mayor.
Oh, apologies.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. I didn't realise. I apologise.
No worries.
Please feel free.
Thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I am pleased to get the opportunity to second this motion because as a council, we need to use our collective voice to let the government know that it is national disability strategy is far from good enough and that Bristol as a city stands by its disability citizens demanding a new one. Adult social care is one of the biggest challenges in the UK, yet there is no plan. In 2019, the Prime Minister promised that no one will have to sell their house to pay for social care under the government's new plan. This will still happen. I would like to start with some complex on the National Disability Strategy. A National Disability Strategy was first promised 10 years ago, and a plan for adult social care over 2 years ago. The former does not even have a strategy, and the latter is yet to be delivered in full. Austerity has disproportionately affected disabled people as they are more likely to rely on public services and that have been cut. They are still overrepresented in unemployment figures. Disabled people were more likely to die from COVID, with 60% people dying from COVID were disabled, despite disabled people only making up 20% of the population. You would think that after all this, there would be a serious reckoning amongst government about how its policy affects disabled people, and you would hope at least that it is a long-awaited disability strategy would address key issues facing disabled people. This was not the case. Instead, disabled people's organizations have called it a box-ticking exercise and tokening non-strategy and random actions of promises. To reiterate, it did not consult with disabled people. It does not address key problems. It does not address disabled people's and their organization priorities. We recognize the importance of co-signing strategies and work with disabled people's organisation, which is why we set up a mayoral commission to look into and address issues facing disabled people in Bristol. The social care cap leaves someone with assets worth 500,000 with 414,000, but leaves someone with assets of 100,000 with just 20,000. These plans are nothing more than a working class tax and need to be opposed in Bristol. If it weren't serious about building back better, it would go above and beyond to address the disparities facing disabled people and announce a proper plan for social care. Sorry, it's my first actual speech, so I'm a bit nervous.
No problem. No problem. Thank you very much, and apologies again for my misunderstanding. I'll now call Councillor Mohammed to speak, please, on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm speaking to support this motion. The government's national disability strategy is terrible. It claims funding of 1.6 billion, but according to the figures from its own disability unit and all of this money, but 3.95 million has been previously announced. This represents 28 pence for disabled person. It will be hard for any government to achieve 100% misrepresentation on any matter. So 99.75% has to be regarded as potentially record-breaking. Disabled people are an oppressed group in society, as well as inaccessible buildings and services. They face systematic discrimination and prejudice. Half of all people in poverty in the UK are either disabled or live with someone who is disabled. Anyone who talks regularly to residents of Bristol social housing knows all about the connection between disability and poverty. Green Party policy is to extend the current UK laws to ensure disabled people are treated as full citizens with protection against any discrimination. At our party conference in October, we voted in a new policy to support free social care for disabled adults. The government's indifference to the needs of disabled people was even evident at COP26, where disabled people were unable to access the venue and there were no BSL sign language interpreters or subtitles for speech. But Bristol has a long way to go as a city to be a welcoming and accessible place for disabled people. The city's chronic problem of pavement parking makes our streets and pavements dangerous and difficult to get around for many people with disabilities, particularly blind people and those in wheelchairs. Reporters may note that Bristol has a long way to go and say that Bristol can no longer claim to be an autism-friendly city and should stop using this slogan. Only one wheelchair user can travel at a time on our buses. So, for example, a disabled couple can't travel together on public transport. The council's failure to meet the needs of children with special education needs and disabilities is well documented. Parents of these children routinely find themselves needing to take the council to court just to get the support they are legally entitled to. There is a long way to improve here as well. And finally, for these and hundreds of other reasons, Bristol Green Party is very pleased to endorse this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I now call Councillor Morris to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. For too long in this city and nation, those with disabilities, both visible and invisible, have faced barriers and challenges to everyday life. When the government was elected, it said it would get to grips with adult social care, and it is trying. Not just through the National Disability Strategy, but also with the widely welcomed Health and Care Bill, and we've already heard about the increase in national insurance to provide some of the required funding. Large, decades-old issues requires multifaceted solutions. I would like to thank the government for living up to their manifesto commitments around improving social care to help those in need. The manifesto of 2019 says we will plan for the infrastructure, workforce growth and healthcare integration, and that is what they are doing. We're not saying it's perfect, but it's going in the right direction. There's a few things in the motion I'd just like to point out. The lack of consultation. This bill is being based around the UK Disability Survey, which received 16,651 responses, which helped shape this strategy. And these respondents were people who have a disability, their carers, or from other interested individuals. Austerity. I long for the day that the Labour Party admit that austerity started by Alistair Darling in 2008 and stop repeating the fact that it's just under the Tories it has happened. Alistair Darling introduced it, of course, because Blair and Brown put a fortune on the Never Never, and we're still paying for it now. Thankfully, the government is paying for the schools PFI bill in Bristol. You even criticise us at the moment for the fact that the bill should have been put through 2 years ago. Well, I would rather the government was concentrating on COVID and its response. I agree the issue of the cap. The issue of the cap is very real. It must be recognised that the current cap for free social care is 14,250. Very, very low. The government is proposing that this puts a cap on the amount you spend of 86,000. The concept is right, I think, as Councillor Holland said, but it may not be right in the delivery of it at the moment. If this council wishes to do something tangible to improve the lives of vulnerable people, they should consider reopening public toilets. Make the chair of the Bristol Disability Equality Commission a paid position, on a par with the other commissions. And of course, as been mentioned by other parties, that there are hundreds of children in this city unable to access education. And of course, it was this administration that lost a judicial review because it found it acted illegally in taking money away from some of the most vulnerable people in the city. So back to this motion. I haven't seen anything positive in this motion. It's all criticism. There's no talking about what you would rather see in it. So in the spirit of collaboration, I suggest that we produce a list.
Councillor Morris, could you wind up, please? Thank you.
And let's sit down and see what's naughty or nice, and let's work together, and we are happy to lobby across the city on those key issues. We will not be supporting the motion, my Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm now going to call Councillor Clark to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group, please.
So yet again, I'm at the end. It feels like a bit of a theme. I think my group is making a bit of a point here. It's been really interesting hearing what groups have said, and it's really interesting to hear what Councillor Morris has said. And I hear what you say, but what is more important to me and at my group is the lived experience, the experience of people in this city and how they find living with a disability and the services that they get or they have access to. Councillor Holland and I both know, and I know that other social workers in this room will know the pressures that social services and the health service are under. We are not able to deliver services to the most vulnerable people because we simply don't have the staff. COVID has made a huge difference to the experience of people with disabilities and the ageing population, whether that be young or old with a disability. But the experience that people have coming out of hospital, trying to get home care, trying to get support, is under serious, serious pressure. I understand that the government have tried to put together a package, but from our side, from the Liberal Democrat side, we will fully be supporting writing to central government about this because I feel that we are at a bit of a cliff edge, really, in terms of care for younger disabled people, older disabled people and older people in our communities. So our group will be supporting this. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for bringing it. And thank you, Councillor Holland, for your persistence at getting it to the Council today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holland, as mover of the motion, would you like to respond to the debate?
Just for 10 seconds, thank you for the thanks for my persistence, but my persistence is in getting better services for vulnerable people in Bristol, and I do appreciate the support that I get across the chamber in doing that, but we need to get social care properly funded. End of.
Okay, thank you very much. So we now move to the vote. Once again, this will be an electronic vote on the buttons. Please vote now. Okay, so we have 54 votes for the motion, 11 against and no abstentions. So that motion is carried. That concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you to all councillors and members of the public who have participated. The next full council will be on the 11th of January. So in the meantime, have a very happy Christmas and we'll see you in the new year. Good evening.